Hey guys, welcome to Fanfic Fanatics. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was sent to the MCU? Part 2, Final. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is What If Deku Was Sent to the MCU by Sylvie 2517. Int. Shuri's lab. Morning. Wakanda's cutting-edge lab hums with energy. Holograms float mid-air. Kinetic panels shift like living circuits. Shuri works at a large display, tweaking designs with smooth gestures. Across the table, Deku is suited in a Wakandan lab robe with green trim, his sleeves rolled up. He's adjusting a strange cylindrical component on a platform, hiding it under a cloth when he hears someone enter. Shuri, still not telling me what it is. Deku, grinning, nope, it's a surprise. You'll see when the time's right. Promise. Shuri rolls her eyes but smiles, clearly enjoying the mystery. Just then, T'Challa enters with confident ease, nodding to both of them. T'Challa, good morning, sister. Midoriya, Deku, yo, T'Challa. He salutes jokingly. King mode suits you. Shuri, you're just in time. We've made some upgrades. Shuri walks over to a platform and gestures. A hologram of two Black Panther suits appears, one traditional, one sleek and seamless with glowing accents. Shuri, to T'Challa, I call this one the Kinetic Panther. Nanotech. It absorbs energy and redirects it on command. T'Challa, impressed. Does it come in black? Shuri, deadpan. What do you think I am, a savage? She gestures again. The suit turns obsidian black with purple lines pulsing like veins. As T'Challa steps toward it, Deku reaches into a sealed storage rack nearby. Deku, hey, since you're getting new gear, I thought I'd show you something I made a while back. He sets a circular object down and unfolds it, a custom shield. It resembles caps in shape but with green and crimson color tones, echoing UA. Class 1A's palette. The metal is clearly Wakandan, elegant yet practical, with Midoriya's personal sigil embossed at the center, a small glowing lightning bolt surrounded by a ring of stylized kanji. T'Challa, raising a brow. Vibranium. Deku, yep, Shuri helped me calibrate the absorption ratio, but I designed the field channels myself. It can hold impact and even bounce like caps. Sort of a tribute to him, and my class back home. Shuri, grinning proudly, he practically lives in here now. I think he's Wakandan by osmosis. T'Challa chuckles, then nods at the shield. You honor your world by carrying a part of it forward. Just don't tell Cap you're freelancing with his aesthetic. Deku, smiling. I'll tell him if he can catch me. The three laugh. T'Challa begins syncing the new Black Panther suit to his Kimoyo beads. Meanwhile, Deku carefully tucks the cloth back over his surprise project, glancing at it with quiet anticipation. Shuri, eyeing the covered project. One day, you're going to let me peek under that sheet. Deku, playfully dramatic. And ruin the suspense. Never. The scene ends with Deku watching as T'Challa tests out the kinetic suit's energy dispersion. The king launches into a practice combo, the suit glowing violet as it absorbs and explodes force in a controlled burst. Deku whistles, impressed. Everything still goes as canon since Deku didn't want T'Challa family to get hurt, so he helps them escape. Fire int. Wakandan herb room. Night. The sacred glow of the heart-shaped herb garden reflects off the cold stone walls. The purple plants shimmer like starlight under the firelight. Killmonger, crowned and cloaked in his new robes, stands tall, voice sharp as a blade. Killmonger, burn it, all of it. Shock floods the room. Shuri, Ramonda, Nakia, and Deku stand in horror as Dora Milaje hesitate. Royal Shaman, but, my king. Killmonger, I said burn it. No more kings. No more challenge. One of the Dora Milaje raises a torch. Nakia tenses to stop her. But Deku steps subtly back, his eyes glowing green. From behind the folds of his cloak, three tendrils of black whip lash out, nearly invisible against the shadows. They gently coil around not one, but three heart-shaped herbs, still untouched at the edge of the garden. With a swift, fluid motion, Deku draws them silently into a hidden pouch under his armor. Only Shuri sees. She flinches but holds her tongue. Shuri whispers. 3. Deku, softly, I have a feeling, we'll need them. The flames catch. The entire garden begins to burn. Killmonger watches like a man turning history to ash. Man running INT. Secret tunnels. Moments later. The group flees through Wakanda's ancient escape passages, Nakia leading, torch in hand. Deku follows at the rear, cloak drawn tight, hand resting protectively on the pouch beneath his side plate. Ramonda, what you did, thank Bast. Shuri, that was reckless. Deku quietly but firmly. It was necessary. Snowflake EXT. Mountain path. Approaching Jabari land, night. Snow blows across the stone path as the group approaches the mountain stronghold. In the distance, guerrilla war drums thump slowly through the frozen air. Shuri, to Deku, what are you going to do with 3? Deku, revive one king, maybe prepare for the next. He looks out toward the snowy cliffs with quiet intensity. Int. Jabari throne room, night. The great wooden doors of the mountain throne room creak open, cold wind howling behind them. M'Baku sits atop his throne, his warriors tense. Ramonda, Shuri, Nakia, and Deku enter, cloaked in urgency. Their eyes fall on a fur-covered slab, and the battered but breathing body of T'Challa. Nakia, softly, in awe. He's alive. Shuri, how did you? M'Baku, we found him in the snow. Barely holding on. We cared for him. Fed him. We are not savages. Deku silently steps forward, kneeling beside T'Challa. He reaches into a sealed pouch and slowly unwraps a cloth, revealing a glowing heart-shaped herb. Gasps echo. Shuri, shocked. As that. Deku, soft, steady. I saved 3, before the fire reached them. Ramonda, moved. You, how? Deku, Black Whip. I moved fast. Quiet. I couldn't save them all, but I saved what I could. He looks up at Ramonda, Shuri, and M'Baku with sincerity in his glowing eyes. Deku, conted. I didn't do it for power. I did it, in case something like this happened. In case Wakanda needed the Black Panther again. You've protected the world in secret for centuries. I just wanted to make sure someone could protect Wakanda too, even when no one else could. A long silence follows. Even M'Baku is silent, nodding once in respect. Shuri, quietly, holding the herb. Then let's save him. Int. Ancestral plane. Night. T'Challa awakens under the glowing sky of the ancestral realm, surrounded by the great panther trees. The soft grass brushes his hands as he rises to his feet. In the distance, his father, T'Chaka, steps forward from the group of previous Black Panthers. T'Chaka, my son. T'Challa, father, I almost failed. Killmonger, he nearly destroyed everything. T'Chaka walks closer, his presence regal, but sorrowful. T'Chaka, you did not fail. You rose again, as a king should. T'Challa glances down. T'Challa, and yet, I needed help. From outsiders. T'Chaka, not an outsider. The boy with the green eyes, he is of another world, yes. But his heart, it belongs to Wakanda. T'Challa quietly. Deku, T'Chaka, you will need him, T'Challa. He is more than just a warrior. He is one the ancestors chose to place in your path. You will understand, in time. T'Chaka touches T'Challa's shoulder. T'Chaka conted. Now go. Your people need their king. Crossed swords fire EXT. Mount Bashenga. Day. Killmonger has taken the throne. The golden jaguar suit gleams under the sun. Wakandan forces are clashing. The Dora Milaje, the border tribe, and others loyal to T'Challa battle against Killmonger's supporters. The air erupts as Deku launches himself into the chaos, landing between 2 clashing lines of warriors. His eyes glow crimson. One for all flares through his limbs. Black Whip lashes out. Warrior number 1, who is? Deku slams the ground with a Fa Jin charged punch, sending shockwaves that knock back armored warriors without killing them. Deku, sorry, nothing personal. He dodges a spear, grabs it midair, and kinetically charges it, hurling it toward a war rhino, detonating harmlessly at its feet to drive it back without harm. With a twist, Black Whip whips out in every direction, binding a dozen attackers. He moves like lightning, coordinating with Okoye and Shuri to create openings. He never kills, only disarms, disables, and knocks out. Okoye, to Shuri, in disbelief. He fights like 10 men. Shuri, he's been holding back. Crossed swords crown near the vibranium mines. T'Challa and Killmonger meet in a final duel mirroring their last. Raw, brutal, personal. Deku sees the duel begin but stops short, breathing heavily. Deku, to himself, this is his fight. Instead, he turns and throws himself into the last of the resistance, helping Nakia and M'Baku push back the Golden Tribe loyalists. Sunrise post-battle, cliffside. T'Challa defeats Killmonger. The golden sun sets behind them as Killmonger speaks his final words. Deku arrives moments after, respectfully standing back as T'Challa lowers his cousin. Killmonger, weakly, bury me in the ocean, with my ancestors who jumped from the ships. T'Challa closes his eyes in pain. Deku turns away, not to intrude. The battle is over. Wakanda is safe. Ext. Oakland. Apartment complex, Future Outreach Center, Sunset. A Wakandan Royal Talon fighter lands gently in the abandoned parking lot where Eric Killmonger grew up. Children run out, amazed at the sight. A sleek vibranium transport ramp lowers, and T'Challa, dressed in simple royal robes, walks out beside Shuri and Deku, who wears a modified version of his hero costume, sleeves rolled up, no mask, and a satchel slung over his shoulder. Kid number 1, yo, is that a spaceship? Kid number 2, nah, it's like Star Wars, man. Shuri, amused, they're adorable. Deku smiles softly as the kids swarm around the ship. He glances up at the complex. Deku, so this is where Killmonger grew up. T'Challa quietly, yes, his world was different from ours, but not less real. They step toward the building. T'Challa looks over the lot as though already seeing what it could become. T'Challa, we'll build the first Wakandan outreach center here. Science and technology in one building, social outreach in another. Shuri walks ahead, already mapping things out in her head. Deku steps beside T'Challa, reaching into his satchel. He pulls out a sealed vibranium container. Inside are the 2 heart-shaped herbs he saved with Blackwhip. Deku, I wanted to talk to you about these. T'Challa looks at them, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the weight of legacy hangs between them. Deku, softly, I didn't save them to share with the world. I saved them, for Wakanda. For the day you might need them. Or someone else you trust. T'Challa, nodding slowly, you understand. These herbs are sacred, more than just power. Their history. Identity. Deku, I don't think Killmonger understood that. He thought power alone was what made a king. T'Challa, a king must first be a servant to his people. T'Challa looks at Deku for a long moment. T'Challa commented, you honored Wakanda by protecting them. One day, they may save someone we haven't yet met. Deku, grinning, good, I'd rather be ready than regret not being prepared. He carefully hands the container to T'Challa, who accepts it with quiet reverence. T'Challa, thank you, Midoriya. Wakanda is safer with you in it and it welcomes you as one of its own. You can decide whether or not you want to be marked. Deku, smiling, anytime, Your Majesty. Scene. The fight in Edinburgh, Vision and Wanda attacked. As in canon, Vision and Wanda are ambushed by Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight. They're being overwhelmed. Vision is badly injured, and things are looking dire. Suddenly, there's a blinding green and gold shockwave. A blur of crackling emerald and crimson lightning streaks across the square. Deku arrives. His eyes glow fiercely, and Blackwhip lashes out from his arms, dragging Proxima away from Wanda. He moves like a force of nature, fists charged with Fa Jin and One for All, now at full mastery. Deku, calm but intense. Vision sent the distress signal. I came as fast as I could. He looks at Proxima and Glaive. You're not taking anyone today. Fight scene. Deku vs Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight. Deku fights Corvus Glaive head-on, using Gearshift's transmission to warp space between steps, appearing behind him with Fa Jin charged momentum and slamming him into the ground. Glaive tries to escape, but Deku intercepts him and breaks the Glaive weapon, then delivers a final, devastating punch, killing Corvus Glaive on the spot. Proxima, seeing this, knows she's outmatched. She escapes using a retreat beacon, vanishing with Glaive's body just before Black Widow, Falcon, and Cap arrive. Scene. Aftermath. The team regroups. Steve, Natasha, and Sam arrive. They're shocked to find Deku already present and Glaive defeated. Natasha, dryly, guess we're late to the party. Deku, grinning, better late than never. They all regroup, and Deku suggests that they bring Vision to Wakanda, where he and Shuri have better tech and protection. He also updates Steve on the situation there. Scene. Return to Wakanda. The team boards a Quinjet and heads to Wakanda. On board, Deku quietly checks Vision's vitals and stabilizes his systems with a compact device made in his Wakandan lab. Wanda sits beside him, visibly shaken. Deku, softly, "You did good, Wanda. You kept him alive, now let us protect him." T'Challa, smiling at Deku. "Welcome home, my friend." Deku, "I brought guests, and trouble." Scene. Arrival in Wakanda, earlier than canon. After rescuing Vision, Deku and the team arrive in Wakanda hours earlier than in the canon timeline, roughly 8 hours ahead, giving Shuri at least 20 to 22 hours total before the Outriders attack. Int. Shuri's lab. Early stages of extraction. Shuri and Deku immediately begin work. Vision is stabilized in a recovery cradle while the lab hums with activity. Deku wears an advanced Wakandan lab cloak over his gear, assisting Shuri with design schematics. Shuri, focused. "The neural net is too complex. But with this time buffer, I can reroute the synaptic pathways into isolated data sectors. You'll assist with integration." Deku, "If I amplify the pathways using one for all's kinetic charge field, I can momentarily stall their degradation while you extract the Mind Stone safely." Bruce, watching, "You can do that." Deku nods. "We've practiced for this kind of emergency. Vision's not dying on our watch." T'Challa, "Whatever you need, Wakanda is at your side." Scene. Hours pass. Dusk falls. We see a time montage. Shuri leads surgical projections, separating Vision's neural pathways. Deku adjusts Vision's bioenergy in real time using Black Whip as a neural buffer, subtly syncing one for all's field to Vision's body. Banner and Shuri argue solutions while Deku mediates and adapts both ideas into one hybrid approach. They're making significant progress. The stone is nearly ready for removal, and the emotional tension of risking Vision's life is less desperate than in canon thanks to earlier intervention. Scene. Final prep before battle. Deku and Shuri take a break outside the lab, looking out toward the Wakandan border. Shuri, "Your arrival bought us precious hours. We might actually pull this off." Deku, softly, "We will. I won't let anyone fall today. Not Vision. Not Wakanda." Shuri, smirks, "Are you always this serious?" Deku, grins, "Only when the world's ending." Suddenly, a tremor. The first wave of energy signatures from the Outrider landing crafts begins to appear on the border. Deku and Shuri lock eyes. Deku, standing up, "Time's up." Ext. Wakandan shield perimeter, twilight. The battlefield is still. In the distance, the Black Order approaches. Proxima Midnight walks at the front, her eyes like cold stars. She's flanked by Cull Obsidian and a cadre of cloaked, elite Outriders. The absence of Corvus Glaive is palpable, his death a fresh wound, especially to Proxima. On the Wakandan side of the barrier, a war council stands ready. T'Challa, regal and unmoving. Steve Rogers, grim and resolved. Natasha Romanoff, eyes narrowed. Deku, quiet, focused, green aura humming faintly from the one for all energy surging through him. The air is tense. The shimmering energy of the barrier undulates between the two factions. Proxima Midnight steps forward. "Proxima Midnight, I see. Corvus fell by the hand of your little foreigner. A trickster wrapped in false strength." She locks eyes on Deku, her hatred plain. "Proxima Midnight, you desecrated his honor." Deku doesn't flinch. He steps forward beside T'Challa and Steve. His eyes glow faintly with energy, calm, but not submissive. "Deku, I protected someone who couldn't protect themselves. That's not desecration. That's what heroes do." T'Challa glances at him with subtle pride. "Steve, we didn't come here to debate right and wrong. You're here for the Mind Stone. You're not getting it." Natasha, coolly, "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and angry. Not a smart combination." Proxima Midnight, "You think your walls, your machines, your hero," she sneers at Deku, "will save you. All will fall before the children of Thanos." Deku raises his hand. Behind him, a soft thrum rises. 8 massive mechs step forward, flanking the leaders, each AI modeled after his friends from UA, eyes glowing, armor shimmering with green and blue circuitry. They hum with contained power, as if alive. Their names Ignis, Tempera, Jetburst, Vox, Phantom Gale, Iron Snap, Soulforge, and Voltgeist. Deku, evenly, Then let's see if your army can stand against mine. Proxima's eyes flick to the mechs, calculating, unsettled. Proxima Midnight, you built puppets. What happens when you die? Deku, firmly. Then they keep fighting. Because they're not puppets. They're memories. Their will. Just like me. Cull Obsidian grunts and steps forward, weapon raised. T'Challa, without moving, turn back, while you still can. Proxima Midnight, low, you'll wish you had died with him. She turns with a final glare at Deku, then walks back through the ranks. As the enemy fades into the dust, a chilling silence hangs. Natasha, she's going to throw everything she has at us. Steve, then we hold the line. T'Challa, and we make sure Wakanda stands. Deku takes a deep breath, then glances at his mechs. Deku, softly, they're going to see what UA was made of. The wind picks up, thunder rumbles faintly in the distance. War is coming. Ext, Wakandan barrier. Moments before the incoming invasion. The air is heavy with anticipation. The assembled defenders, T'Challa, Steve, Natasha, Deku, and the Wakandan warriors, stand ready behind the shimmering energy barrier. Deku steps forward, eyes sharp, calm but electric with focus. He raises his right hand and clenches it into a fist. Deku, quiet but resolute, for everyone we protect. This ends here. He touches his wrist where a subtle green glow pulses, a compact signal device. His fingers slide across it with practiced ease. In the distance, a faint hum grows louder, more mechanical than organic. Suddenly, slicing through the sky at high speed, a sleek pod-like craft streaks toward them, bathed in green and black light. Its shape is aerodynamic but angular, with the design language blending Wakandan tech aesthetics and Deku's hero vibe. The pod lands smoothly on the ground just behind Deku with a subtle whir and clank. The hatch opens like a mechanical flower unfolding. Twin clamps extend and snap onto Deku's arms and shoulders, enveloping him in a pulse of bright energy. The pod transforms, rising upward and locking into place around Deku, revealing the final form of his custom armor, the sleek, flexible, battle-ready suit he worked on with Shuri and Tony's tech. Its design, sleek emerald green body armor plates with black and silver accents. The one for all emblem subtly glowing on the chest. Lightweight but visibly reinforced, allowing for maximum agility. Lines of circuitry pulse softly with green cosmo energy. The helmet slides over his head smoothly, visor glowing faintly like his eyes. Deku flexes his fingers inside the suit, the energy resonating through him, melding his one-for-all power with Wakandan technology and his own innovations. Deku, smiling slightly, energized, ready for this. Steve nods approvingly. T'Challa's eyes reflect cautious respect, Natasha's expression tightens with focus. The rest of the Wakandan defenders brace as the barrier begins to ripple, signaling the imminent arrival of the Black Order's assault. Infinity War. The Battle of Wakanda, Part 1. The low hum of the energy barrier echoed across the Wakandan plains. In the distance, dust rose like mist as Thanos' army advanced, screeching and snarling, war beasts clawing at the earth in anticipation. On the front line, King T'Challa stood, his expression grim but focused. Beside him were Captain America, Black Widow, Okoye, and Izuku Midoriya. Deku, his armored boots rooted firmly in the soil. T'Challa raised his hand toward the barrier. On my mark, open section 17. A pulse rippled through the golden hexagonal wall, and with a thunderous shudder, a section of the barrier vanished. The beasts surged forward. Midoriya, Steve said, voice calm and direct, you ready? Deku nodded. We've trained for worse. Let's show them what we're fighting for. Before the creatures reached the line, 8 giant mechanical warriors dropped from the treetops. Sleek, agile, Wakandan-engineered mechs built by Deku himself during his time in Wakanda. Each was modeled after fused personalities of his UA classmates. Ignis, a crimson and navy blue mech inspired by Bakugo and Kirishima, roared through the internal speakers. Let's light 'em up, it shouted with Bakugo's aggressive bite and Kirishima's battle-hardened grit. Tempra, with icy armor and charged vents inspired by Todoroki and Yaoyorozu, raised its arms and let loose a frosty wave that hardened into a wall of spikes before launching them toward the incoming horde. Deploying defense. Engage offensive sequencing, it said, voice calm and composed like both of its inspirations. Jetburst, crafted from Iida and Uraraka's data, shot forward with blurring speed, dropping anti-gravity mines as it zipped between enemies, then punched down with massive boosters behind its fists. "Why, you've got this!" Vox, the support-focused unit derived from Suyu and Jiro, called out with a shy but dependable voice. Mounted with sonic disruption units, it blasted the oncoming creatures with disorienting pulses that kept them at bay. The others, Phantom Gale, Iron Snap, Soulforge, and Voltgeist, each brought their own quirks and personalities to the battlefield. Together, they were Deku's gift to Wakanda, 8 autonomous fighters built to protect what mattered most. Deku joined the charge himself. His armored boots cracked the dirt as he launched forward. His black whip flared from his gauntlets, grabbing a beast midair and slamming it into 3 others. "They're trying to flank the left side," called Falcon over comms. "I see them," Deku responded, voice clear and composed. His danger sense tugged at him to shift right, and he did, barely avoiding a beast lunging from the trees. He twisted, unleashed a whip of energy, and yanked it down, stomping it into the earth with a burst of Fa Jin-enhanced momentum. T'Challa leapt forward with a cry. "Wakanda forever!" The army behind him echoed the battle cry, and they surged. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Cap was a blur of motion, his shield tearing through enemies with precise fury. Okoye and her Dora Milaje fought in perfect synchrony, blades cutting with elegance and force. Deku was a force of nature among them. Using float, he hovered briefly, scanning the battlefield. His danger sense helped him direct Tempera to block an incoming wave with a wall of hardlight. Iron Snap, the powerhouse inspired by Shoji and Ojiro, delivered a brutal spin kick that launched a creature into the air, only to be vaporized by Jetburst's sonic propulsion beam. Just then, his comm crackled. "Midoriya," Shuri's voice came through, focused but slightly winded. "We've done it. The stone is removed." Deku landed behind the front line, taking cover beside Proxima Midnight's abandoned pike, still jutting from the ground. "You did it. Is Vision okay?" "His vitals are stable. I'm uploading his consciousness into a synthesized body now. The frame was prepared by our team while you and I worked on his neural interface. This is no longer a matter of minutes, we've bought ourselves hours." Deku exhaled, his eyes glowing faintly behind his visor. "That's a miracle, Shuri." "No, it's Wakandan science," she said flatly, with the smallest smile in her tone. "And your AI multitasking protocols helped. You should see the new body. He won't just survive, he'll evolve." Deku turned to look at the horizon, where hundreds more creatures spilled from the darkened sky, snarling, digging into the soil like feral shadows. "We just need to hold them long enough." "We will," Shuri replied. "For Wakanda." Deku stood, looked back at his mechs in motion, and at the comrades fighting tooth and nail beside them. Tempera slid beside him, shield integrity at 87%. Offensive protocols holding. "Recommend we collapse the west flank and reroute to the central push." "Do it," Deku ordered. "Ignis, cover Tempera's route and make sure Vox is guarded. I'm heading up front." "On it," Ignis roared. As Deku launched back into the fray, Black Whip lashed out around him, catching enemies by the limbs and smashing them into the dirt. His body moved like flowing energy, empowered by One for All, enhanced by Fa Jin's explosive storage, guided by gearshift and danger sense. He was Wakanda's hidden ace. Over comms, Steve's voice cut in. "They're going to throw everything they've got. Everyone stay sharp." T'Challa's voice followed. "We hold this ground. This is where we stop them." And then a silence. Not fear, resolve. Deku's eyes narrowed. The sky above them began to darken. Something was coming, but they had time. Vision was safe. The stone was secure, and for the first time, they were fighting with the upper hand. He clenched his fists. "Let's show them what heroes can do." Infinity War. Battle of Wakanda, Part 2, rewritten Wanda scene. The battlefield was chaos incarnate, blurs of claws, smoke, and the rumble of war. Deku sprinted forward, his armored boots carving furrows through scorched dirt. One for All surged through his limbs in timed pulses, every motion calculated, devastating. He sent one of the massive Outriders flying with a roundhouse kick, his black whip flaring from his back to lash 2 more into the air. A pulse of red energy lit the edge of the fray. Deku turned, spotting Wanda Maximoff surrounded by half a dozen Outriders. She was holding her own, scarlet energy exploding outward as she hovered above the field, but her breathing was ragged. She'd been fighting since the barrier fell. Deku dashed in, vaulting over a wrecked rhino tank, his body glowing with kinetic recoil. "Wanda!" he shouted. He landed in a crouch beside her just as two more Outriders lunged. His hand shot forward, Black Whip extending like a lance. Crack! Piercing both in one go before yanking them back and slamming them into the ground. "I told you I could handle myself," she said through a pant, a faint smile curving her lips. Deku chuckled, deflecting a blow with a raised forearm plate. "I never said you couldn't. Just figured you'd want a breather." Their moment was brief. Another wave swarmed toward them, but Soulforge crashed into their flank, blades of energy forming from its elbows as it tore through enemies with shadow and lightning. "Assist complete. Let's go again," it shouted, sounding like a battle-crazed fusion of Tokiyami's discipline and Kaminari's chaotic flair. Wanda exhaled and looked to Deku, her crimson energy dimming for a moment. "I felt it," she said quietly. "The stone. It's gone." Deku's helmet folded back from his face as he caught his breath. "We took it out." Shuri's transferring Vision's data now, to the new synthetic body. Her eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief. "He's alive?" she asked, almost afraid to hope. "He is," Deku nodded. "He opened his eyes 20 minutes ago. Shuri and I made sure everything was perfect." Wanda's expression softened, but tears welled in her eyes behind the sweat and grime. "You really did it." Deku met her gaze, voice steady. "He's not just surviving, he's complete. No Mind Stone, just vision." For a second, the war seemed to hush around them. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Deku grinned, flicking more Black Whip toward an oncoming beast and snapping its jaw shut. "No need. We protect our own. And Vision. He matters. To all of us." Wanda took a step back, nodding once with resolve. "Then let's finish this, so he has something to wake up to." She lifted into the air again, red energy roaring around her as she dove back into the chaos, leaving Deku standing beneath the smoke-streaked sky, surrounded by the sounds of battle, but feeling like, for just a second, they were winning. A voice cut through his comms. "Shuri, Midoriya, we're ahead of schedule. The stone's fully extracted." Uploading Vision's neural map to the new body. Deku's eyes sharpened. "Good. Keep him safe. This ends today." Then he turned, one for all crackling like a storm beneath his skin, and leapt back into the heart of the war. Infinity War. Battle of Wakanda, Part 4, When Titans Arrive. The sky burned red with war. From the western ridge, Proxima Midnight screamed as her glaive clashed with Phantom Gale, who corkscrewed midair, slicing with wind-edged energy blades and tossing Outriders like paper. Jetburst and Voltgeist blitzed around her, one leaving shockwaves with her dashes, the other zipping like blue lightning between enemies with targeted whip strikes. And above the clamor, Shuri's voice rang through Deku's comms. "Transfer complete. The Mind Stone has been extracted and is now secured. Vision's data core has been stabilized. He's on the field." Deku smiled, even amid the intensity. "Copy that. Welcome back, Vision." From the edge of the medical dome, Vision flew into view, his new body sleek, made of vibranium white alloy etched with gold nodes, his forehead now free of the yellow gem. His eyes glowed softly, intelligent and calm. He phased through a wave of Outriders and launched coordinated strikes with Iron Snap and Tempera, folding energy constructs around enemies like traps. Wanda broke formation from the north ridge and sprinted toward him, fending off 3 Outriders with a wave of psionic energy. When she reached Vision, he steadied her by the hand. "I remember everything," he said, quietly. She nodded, tears in her eyes, then turned toward the swarm. "Let's finish this." In the central trench, Deku slammed down, cracking the earth and staggering an oncoming siege beast. Soulforge leapt in beside him and delivered a devastating elbow, knocking the creature off balance. The others followed, Ignis blasting open a path with searing combustive strikes, Tempera freezing the flanks to block more troops from slipping through. "Midoriya," T'Challa called from the ridge, standing beside Cap and Thor. "Form the forward spear. They're pushing everything now." Deku looked up. Thanos' ship had entered the upper atmosphere, blotting out the clouds. Deku turned to his mechs. "Formation Alpha. Wall of 8. Vox. Engaging. Voltgeist. Right on it, boss. Jetburst. Showtime. Ignis. Let's end this already." The 8 vibranium mechs flanked Deku, forming a mobile wedge that drove into the Outrider front like a blade. As the Wakandan soldiers fell back to regroup, Deku surged ahead, one for all laced with precision, every strike surgical, amplified by his armor. He caught sight of Thor in the distance, his Stormbreaker tearing through Leviathan armor. Cap flanked his side, shield raised, and Black Widow ran like a blur, blades gleaming. Just like New York, Cap muttered to himself. But they weren't ready for what came next. Thanos stepped through a warp gate, the Infinity Gauntlet glowing with 5 stones. Deku's smile dropped. All units, converge, he said quietly. From above, Phantom Gale and Iron Snap responded first. Tempra and Soulforge redirected ground forces to form a perimeter. Cap, Wanda, T'Challa, and Thor closed in. And Deku, his armor humming as Black Whip shimmered under the surface, stepped forward to face the Titan. Thanos scanned the battlefield with quiet disappointment. You delay the inevitable, but I will honor this resistance. He raised the gauntlet. The battlefield fell into a moment of dreadful silence. And then chaos erupted. Deku lunged first. His presence was magnetic, terrifying. Clad in his battle armor, the Infinity Gauntlet gleamed ominously. The battlefield quieted, as if holding its breath. Deku stepped forward, unwavering. This ends here, Thanos. The Titan's cold gaze locked onto him. You are brave, little warrior. But bravery will not save you. With a sudden burst of cosmic power, Thanos slammed the ground, unleashing the full fury of the Power Stone. Deku barely had time to react. His armored suit buckled under the raw energy, knocking him back violently. Sparks flew from his suit's joints as the shockwave tore through the field. Deku, came Shuri's voice urgently. The mechs surged to shield him, but even their vibranium exteriors strained under the blast. Gathering every ounce of strength, Deku pushed back with Black Whip energy, tendrils lashing out like dark lightning. I won't let you win. Their energies clashed, but Thanos' might was overwhelming. He swatted the black tendrils aside like dust, advancing relentlessly. Suddenly, a blur of lightning slammed into Thanos, Thor's hammer crackled with thunder, and the Titan staggered briefly, eyes flashing with fury. But then chaos erupted. From the side, a cloaked figure, the last of the Tusken Raiders who had infiltrated the battlefield, darted through the fray. In his hands, glowing ominously, was the Soul Stone. Without hesitation, the Raider passed the stone directly into Thanos' gauntlet, his whisper lost in the roar of battle. With the Soul Stone now in place, Thanos' grin widened, cold and triumphant. No more hiding, Thanos growled. His gauntlet glowed fiercely, pulsating with a terrible finality. The mechs roared in protest, launching a final coordinated assault, but it was futile. The stone's power overwhelmed them, systems shutting down one by one, their voices fading into silence. Deku tried to rally, but his suit began to short-circuit. Thor, we can't hold him. Stand fast. Thor bellowed, swinging Stormbreaker with unrelenting force. But the inevitable came. With a snap, the universe seemed to shudder. A wave of silence swept the battlefield. Half the warriors, heroes, and friends flickered like dying embers, disintegrating into dust. Among those who vanished was Vision, his new vibranium body dissolving into nothingness alongside Wanda, who had been fighting fiercely beside him. Deku's breath caught as he looked around. The mechs were motionless, the fields eerily empty. But some remained. Steve Rogers, battered but unyielding, stood firm. Thor's storm still crackled with fury, but even he looked shaken. Rocket, Okoye, Shuri, all survivors, all left with a gaping wound in their hearts. Deku clenched his fists inside his armored gloves. This isn't over. We'll bring them back. And with that vow burning fierce within him, the battle for the universe had only just begun. Year 3 after the snap, Wakanda had changed. The city still gleamed with vibranium's quiet hum and glowing lights, but its heart crackled with absence. Burnin Zana hosted no grand celebrations. No campaigns, no laughter echoing in the labs. No King T'Challa. In the heart of the palace lab, Izuku Midoriya remained, an unwavering shadow. He no longer smiled. His eyes were glassy, once red rings now dark and hollow. Inside, names of lost heroes echoed relentlessly. Todoroki, Uraraka, Iida, Bakugo, gone. To him, to the world. He rebuilt the 8 mechs. Vox, Jetburst, Tempra, Voltgeist, Soulforge, Iron Snap, Ignis, Phantom Gale, but left them in silent dormancy. No voice, no laughter, just idle guardians haunting the walls. He pushed himself beyond human limits. One for All itself trembled beneath his focus. Sleepless nights, gravity simulations, vibration of armor cores screaming, he refused to pause. He wore one heart-shaped herb, alone, and without ceremony. It amplified his energy, but also drained him. He never spoke of it. He refused to return to the States. Wakanda needed him, he told himself, and would not leave until he fixed everything. Wakanda. Winter night, Year 3. Okoye stood sentinel above Deku's lab, wind pulling at her braided cloak. Across the courtyard, the hidden gardens were silent, no children's laughter, no hum of training drones. 3 years, she murmured. Tony Stark appeared beside her. No suit, just a taller man now, beard flecked with gray, lines of grief across his face. He was quieter, but held himself with measured strength, like a man who had built a new life. Is he reachable? Tony asked. Okoye nodded slowly. He exists in that lab. But he's disconnected. From joy, family, from hope. Tony exhaled. Let's give him another chance. The lab. Moments later. The lab glowed dimly under artificial lights. Holographic displays flickered with failed simulations, visions of time travel, of undoing the snap, of impossible salvation. At the center, shirtless and bruised, Deku faced the largest projected image. The moment of Thanos' snap, Vision and Wanda dissolving in each other's arms. Tony entered quietly. No fanfare, no armor, just a pulse of concern. You look like hell, Tony said softly. Deku didn't turn. His voice was hollow. I'm working. There's working, and there's self-immolation. Deku remained silent. Tony stepped closer, eyes scanning the lab. I tracked 42 times your heart flatlined over the last month. The AI reported it before I came in. Deku's shoulders twitched. I know exactly what it feels like to spend years blaming yourself, Tony continued. To build armor and walls that never close. To wake up wishing it was all a dream. Deku finally faced him, eyes red. Please tell me you have a solution. Tony crouched down and opened his satchel. Inside, Deku's first UA hoodie, worn, patched, but still familiar. And a faded photo of his classmates. Deku's hand trembled as he touched the fabric. He whispered, voice broken. I thought if I got stronger, if I healed the universe, maybe the pain would stop. Tony placed a hand on his shoulder. Pain doesn't stop until you embrace it. You can move forward without forgetting them. That's healing. Deku's breath hitched. After a long moment, he reached for the coffee Tony offered. Night's End. Through a silent corridor, Okoye watched them emerge. Deku and Tony, side by side. Not as student and mentor, but as two survivors, scarred, hopeful, weary. Deku looked to the sky, toneless but clear. Tony placed a steady hand on his back. No declaration of peace, no happy reunion, just two men who understood loss reaching for something like future. 2 months after Tony returned to Wakanda. The days were still quiet in Wakanda, but not as hollow. The air had begun to shift. Izuku Midoriya had changed. The silent nights of vigilante patrols and hollow victories had started giving way to something warmer, something human again. And it didn't come from the lab or from training. It came from the man who refused to let him spiral forever. It came from Tony Stark. Stark's visits. Tony didn't break down walls with declarations. He showed up. Sometimes, it was just him standing outside the lab with 2 coffees and a smirk. Other days, it was Pepper and little Morgan sitting in the jet, waiting to see Uncle Zuko for lunch. They'd fly him to the lakeside home Tony had built far from the noise of Iron Man. Hey, Green Bean, Tony had said once, tossing a basketball. She thinks you're cooler than me, you know. Fix that. Deku had barely cracked a smile back then. But over time, he laughed again. Played, held Morgan on his shoulders while she tugged on his hair. Ate real food with real people. And somewhere in those slow, careful moments, the cracks in him began to heal. The letter. Tony was the one who finally placed it on the table. The envelope T'Challa had left behind. Sealed before that final fight, before the war that tore everything apart. Deku's hands trembled as he opened it. If you live and I do not, it read. Then Wakanda must still be protected. You are not of my blood, but you are of my spirit. You carry a heart that is worthy. If my people accept you, then so do the kings who came before me. You are my brother. Protect them. Not for me, for them. The ceremony. It wasn't held in the city. Not where politics reigned. It was at Mount Bashenga, where the first Black Panther had risen. Where kings and protectors were truly forged. The Wakandan council stood in silence. The skies above were painted in golden dusk, the light dimming as if to make way for the soul of a nation to speak. Queen Ramonda stepped forward, her robes trailing like thunderclouds. You took the heart-shaped herb in desperation, she said, voice unwavering. You wore its strength in battle. But this is not an act of power. It is an act of faith. Deku stood tall, not proud, not seeking approval, just ready. She held out a bowl, filled not with the herb, but with the ceremonial soil of Wakanda, black and rich as obsidian. Kneel, Izuku Midoriya, she said. He did. This nation lost its king. It lost its prince, but not its hope. She pressed the soil across his arms, his chest, his brow. By T'Challa's word and the will of the people, do you accept the duty to protect Wakanda? I do, he said softly. For him, for them, for what he believed in. The ancestral plane. The moment the liquid from the heart-shaped herb touched his lips, the world dimmed. The sky bled violet, the earth turned to memory, and Deku stood in a place beyond time. From the trees, T'Challa stepped forward. He was smiling. I always knew you'd carry the weight, T'Challa said. I wasn't ready, Deku whispered. I'm still not. No one is. That's what makes it worth doing. He placed a hand on Deku's shoulder. You will never stand alone. Not here. Not in life. Behind him, shadows of panthers, ancestors, watched silently. Not judging. Waiting. Deku's heart trembled. I miss you all, he said. And I'm proud of you, T'Challa replied. Now go. They need you. Return. Deku awoke gasping, surrounded by the fires of ritual and chants echoing through the night. He wasn't adorned with a crown. No title was spoken, but they didn't need to say it. He was more than a hero now. He was Wakanda's protector. And when he looked up to the sky, he saw the stars shimmer just a bit brighter. Wakanda. Year 4 after the snap. Wakanda was still mourning, but it no longer grieved in silence. Under Izuku's guidance, the kingdom began to breathe again, slowly, like a body waking from a deep wound. The fields that once grew the heart-shaped herb, thought gone forever, had begun to sprout again, carefully nurtured by scientists and spiritual leaders. A new generation of Wakandan engineers emerged, their minds inspired not only by Shuri's legacy, but by the tireless work of the foreign-born protector who now wore the mantle of Black Panther. They didn't call him Deku. They didn't even call him Panther. They simply called him Izuku, a name they had come to associate with kindness, brilliance, and a strength born not from power, but from persistence. The shield of the past. It was at a memorial in the Garden of Kings, where statues of the fallen stood under the open sky, that Tony Stark returned for another visit. Izuku met him not in ceremonial garb, but in a sleeveless tunic, calloused hands dusted with graphite and oil from hours in the lab. He walked with purpose, not burdened like before, but steady, collected. In his hands, he held something wrapped in cloth. Tony raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? Izuku smiled softly, and unwrapped the item. It was the original vibranium shield, the one Steve Rogers had left behind in Siberia. Untouched, unwielded, a symbol of a time torn apart. I kept it safe, Izuku said. Back then, I thought, maybe it belonged to me now. Or that I had to carry what Steve left behind. Tony studied the shield, expression unreadable. But I was wrong, Izuku continued. It wasn't mine to hold. It never was. That shield was a symbol. But the person behind it was more than that. Just like you. He gently handed it to Tony. You can give it to someone else when the time comes. Someone who's ready for it. Tony took it, the weight both literal and emotional. You sure? I've got my own, Izuku replied. He gestured to the shield on his back. A sleek circular design, trimmed in green, white, and dark red. His UA-class colors embedded subtly in the starless center. It was a shield not of legacy, but of identity. Tony gave a quiet, approving nod. Looks good on you, kid. Rebuilding a nation. With Shuri gone, Wakanda's technological momentum could have stalled, but Izuku made sure it didn't. He coordinated her old teams, invited in trusted minds from across the nation, and even began opening select programs for outreach, not globally, but to neighboring African nations in need. Quiet partnerships. Safe, guarded ones. The kind T'Challa might have started in time, and that Izuku now honored. He oversaw agricultural reforms, ensured the Jabari were no longer isolated, and encouraged the integration of more rural voices into the scientific and warrior circles. And most of all, he listened. He didn't command with grandeur. He asked questions, took notes, helped with heavy lifting and testing prototypes in person. The people respected him not because he had the strength of gods, but because he sat beside them, shoulder to shoulder. He walked the city markets every week. He sparred with trainees every morning. He volunteered in the restoration projects every night. And when he passed, people bowed, not out of obligation, but gratitude. A moment with the Queen. One evening, Queen Ramonda visited him in the garden near the Royal Archives. She watched as he adjusted the defensive cores on one of the border patrol towers, personally. Sweating, smudged with dirt, smiling faintly to himself. "You work too much," she said softly. He looked over, surprised, and bowed respectfully. "Only because there's so much left to do." She stepped forward, eyes kind but firm. "You remind me of my son. Especially in how you carry everyone else's burdens like your own." Izuku looked down. "I still hear him. When I close my eyes. I still wish he were the one leading them." "You are not replacing him, Izuku. You are honoring him. T'Challa chose you not because he doubted himself, but because he believed in you." They stood in silence as the sun dipped low. "He would have been proud of you," she added. "As I am." A new flame. By year 5, Wakanda had become a beacon again, not just of innovation, but of resilience. And though many still wept for what was lost, they found solace in the young man who stood not above them, but with them. He bore his shield not like a symbol of war, but as a promise. "We're still here, we're still fighting, and we won't stop until we bring them home." Avengers Compound. 5 years after the snap. The wind carried little warmth, despite the sun casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Steve Rogers stood with arms crossed outside the old Avengers facility, his eyes watching the tree line like a soldier without a war. Inside, Natasha Romanoff sat amid screens and empty coffee cups, scanning reports that brought no comfort. Then, through the intercom. "Hi. Hello. Anyone there? This is Scott Lang, Ant-Man. I know it's weird, but I've got something really important. It's about time travel." The words seemed to freeze the air. Steve turned. Natasha's eyes went wide. "Is this real?" she asked. Steve didn't answer. He was already heading to the door. Briefing room 45 minutes later. Scott Lang had finished explaining the quantum realm, the strange time dilation, and his belief that it could be used as a tool, not to rewrite the past, but to retrieve what they had lost. "Time travel," Banner muttered. "You know how crazy that sounds, right?" "No, I get it. It is crazy," Scott said, waving his hands. "But it's also science. Wild science, but science." As the others debated, a quiet footstep echoed from the hallway. Izuku entered, his presence grounding the room like a bolt of lightning to stone. His black and green vibranium suit, sleek, battle-worn, hugged his frame. A faint glow pulsed from the embedded one-for-all circuitry beneath. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at Scott. Then finally, "You said 5 hours passed for you. But it's been 5 years here." Scott nodded. "Yeah, it's insane. But, no," Izuku interrupted gently, stepping forward. "It means they aren't lost. They're waiting." A hush fell over the room. Steve glanced at Izuku. "You believe him?" "I want to," Izuku replied. "But wanting isn't enough. I think we need more than science. We need Tony Stark's cabin." That evening, the lake glimmered orange under the setting sun. Wind rustled the trees as a black Wakandan cruiser landed gently near Tony's cabin. Tony stepped outside, wiping his hands on a rag. His daughter's voice rang faintly behind him. He expected Cap, maybe Nat, but when he saw Izuku stepping down from the cruiser, his expression softened. A hesitant smile tugged at his lips. Didn't expect you, Tony said. Thought you'd be waist deep in vibranium code. Izuku smiled faintly. I needed to see you. They walked side by side toward the cabin porch. The air was still. She asleep? Izuku asked. Out cold. Tony nodded, glancing back. Pepper too. It's the only time the house is quiet. They sat on the porch stairs in silence for a while. Then, softly, Izuku said, I know you've made peace with it. I've tried to, but I still see them in my dreams. Peter, T'Challa, everyone. Tony didn't look at him. I know. I tried to carry on. I helped rebuild Wakanda, reformed systems, built a future, but it still hurts, Tony. Even now. Tony's jaw clenched. And now there's a way. Maybe, Izuku added, but it's not just a shot in the dark. I've seen what Scott's talking about. I've run the quantum decay simulations. It lines up. You never told me, Tony said quietly. I didn't want to give you another burden. You deserve peace. Tony finally looked at him. The mask of casual indifference dropped. Hey, he said, you were there when I couldn't stand. When I couldn't even look Pepper in the eye without seeing the blood on my hands. You pulled me out of a grave, Izuku said. Now I'm asking you to help bring back the rest. Tony exhaled, long and slow. You really think we can win this? I think we can try, Izuku replied, hand resting over his chest. And I think the man who helped build a world for his daughter can help rebuild the rest. Tony's eyes welled, just faintly. You've been watching me grow, but I've been watching you too, kid. Izuku turned. You didn't just survive the snap. You carried half a world on your back. You earned my respect, and if you're asking me to try again, then I guess we should. He stood. No promises, no guarantees, but if we're gonna risk it, I'd rather have you beside me. Izuku stood as well. I never left. Back at the compound. The next morning. The soft hum of Tony's Audi e-tron echoed into the compound courtyard. Izuku stepped out first, followed by Tony, carrying a case of blueprints and tech modules. Scott's jaw dropped. He came. You convinced him. Tony smirked. You're lucky the Green Knight here still believes in miracles. Bruce raised his brows. You really think this can work? Tony shrugged. I ran a simulation last night. Then I ran 58 million more. Most ended in fire. Everyone fell silent. But one didn't. Izuku looked up. Then that's the one we choose. Avengers Compound. Lab level. The underground lab hummed with energy. Holographic displays flickered above tables layered with schematics, alloy samples, and neural link blueprints. In the center, Tony Stark and Izuku Midoriya stood side by side, surrounded by holograms of the Quantum Realm Corridor in Mark 001 quantum suits. Tony's eyes scanned a floating schematic. We're going for quantum stability under 1 picosecond. Anything longer and you're turning into jelly on re-entry. Izuku adjusted a dial with a flick of his fingers. I reinforced the suit's anchor points with vibranium weave, layered under a kinetic absorption mesh. If the time stream pulls too hard, they won't snap. Smart, Tony muttered. Glad you're on our side, Green Lightning. Izuku raised a brow. We're still not calling me that. Right, because, Izuku, really rolls off the tongue when time is collapsing around us. The banter was light, but everyone could feel it, the weight behind the project. They were going to time travel, and if they failed, there was no second try. Behind them, Bruce helped Scott Lang into the newly fabricated white and black quantum suit. Scott stared at the design, blinking. I feel like a Power Ranger. You look like one, Bruce deadpanned. From the back of the room, Steve Rogers walked in, arms folded, jaw set. Natasha followed, quiet but determined. Everything ready? Steve asked. As ready as it'll ever be, Tony said. We're not going to Disneyland, Cap. This isn't the kind of time travel where we high-five past selves and grab hot dogs. Scott raised a finger. I mean, we could. No, Tony and Izuku said in unison. Bruce chuckled. We just need to test if you come back in one piece. Scott climbed onto the quantum pad. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. In a blink of light and sound, he vanished. A second later, he reappeared, gasping, spinning, but alive. Did it work? He asked breathlessly. Am I me? Tony examined the data. No more or less annoying than usual. Success. Izuku stepped forward and nodded. That gives us confirmation. Time displacement is survivable, but limited. We'll need a navigation system for each trip. One wrong move, and someone gets lost forever. We'll need a team, Steve said. We already have one, Tony replied, looking at Izuku, then Bruce and Nat. And now we have a shot. Later that day, Avengers Hangar Bay. The team gathered around as final preparations were underway. Thor, now heavier and more reclusive, stood to one side. Rocket tried to adjust his quantum harness while arguing over food packets. Clint Barton kept to himself, staring at his own suit's design in silence. Nebula was inspecting her gauntlet. And then, Tony opened a familiar case. A shield. Not just a shield. The shield. Polished. Repaired. Still gleaming with the red, white, and blue. Steve's eyes locked on it the moment Tony unsnapped the case. Found it in the garage, Tony said, his voice quieter than usual. Figured maybe it was time. Steve walked forward slowly. You sure? Tony looked him in the eye. I didn't bring back the man who broke it. I brought back the man who carried it. Steve reached for the shield, then paused. Behind him, he noticed Izuku, silent, watching the exchange. On Izuku's back was his own shield, the one he'd carried since Civil War. It had the metallic green gleam of Wakandan alloy, laced with pale silver etchings resembling his old hero costume. The center bore a faint starburst mark with 8 slashes, for the friends he'd lost in the snap. Steve turned back to Tony and gently accepted the shield. Thank you, he said. Tony smiled. Don't make me regret it. Izuku looked down for a moment, then lifted his eyes and stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but clear. I remember when I first held mine, he said to Steve. I didn't feel worthy. I only took it because someone needed to protect others. Steve looked at him warmly. You've always been worthy, Izuku. Even without it. Izuku gave a faint nod. Let's make this one count. Night before the time heist. Avengers compound. The compound was still. A rare silence draped over its halls like a respectful hush before battle. The hum of machinery continued softly, but even the suits and tech seemed to know what was coming. Tomorrow, the team would do the impossible, time travel to undo 5 years of loss. And Izuku Midoriya wasn't going with them. He walked through the corridors, armored suit off, wearing only a dark undershirt and combat pants, vibranium shield slung across his back. His steps were slow, not because of hesitation, but because of the weight of all that had happened. The echoes of the past 5 years still lived in these halls. Laughter turned to silence. Rooms that once housed friends and teammates now stood hollow. But tonight, he walked with purpose. He had something to say. First, Natasha. He found her on the training platform, lacing up her gloves, going through slow, methodical punches. Can't sleep either, he asked gently. She didn't turn. If I sleep, I'll think. If I think, I'll hesitate. Izuku stepped closer. You won't. Not when it matters. Nat turned slightly. Why aren't you going with us? I've done what I could, he said. The suits, the calibrations, the shielding. But this isn't my mission. She gave a small smile. You've been carrying enough. Time someone else picked up the load. He chuckled. That's what I told myself. But, if it fails. It won't, she said firmly. Because we're doing this for them. For everyone. He nodded, and they shared a quiet, mutual understanding. No more words were needed. Second, Clint. Out on the lawn, Clint stood alone, watching the stars. Izuku approached him slowly. You good? Clint didn't look away from the sky. You ever wonder if we deserve to bring them back? All the time, Izuku said. But then I remember. They deserve to live. Clint let out a slow breath. If this works, I just want my family back. Izuku stepped beside him. You will. Why aren't you coming? Because if something happens to all of you, someone has to be left to fight. Clint looked over at him and gave a small, grateful nod. Third, Tony. In the garage, Tony was tinkering. Not the frantic kind. Something smaller, quieter. A small bracelet-sized piece of armor for his daughter. He didn't look up when Izuku arrived. You checking on everyone tonight? I figured someone should. Tony smirked. I'm touched. Izuku leaned against the table. You've changed a lot. Tony gave a short laugh. Kid, 5 years of guilt, a daughter, and half a universe snapped away will do that. Silence passed before Tony finally looked at him. You really not coming? Izuku shook his head. You know why? Tony nodded. Yeah, you're the failsafe. If this goes south, you're the last man standing. And you're the one risking everything. Tony scoffed. What else is new? Izuku smiled. For what it's worth, thank you. For helping me heal. For believing in this. Tony looked at him, softer now. You helped me first, Izuku. I'm just returning the favor. They shook hands. Firm. Final. Like family. Last. Steve. Steve was sitting outside, shield across his lap. He was polishing it, slow and deliberate. Izuku walked up and sat beside him on the wooden bench. Yours is shinier, Steve said without looking up. You're just jealous mine has color, Izuku replied. Steve smirked. Maybe a little. They sat quietly under the stars for a long moment. You sure about staying behind? Steve finally asked. Someone needs to be here in case something happens, Izuku said. And I've already said goodbye once. Steve nodded. You remind me of me. Izuku glanced at him. You were my role model. You still are. Steve looked at his shield, then back at Izuku. I ever tell you that you've grown into your own symbol? You're not just the hero from another world anymore. You're our hero now. That caught Izuku off guard. He didn't reply, just bowed his head slightly in quiet gratitude. Dawn. Hangar Bay. The team gathered around the quantum platform, now glowing and ready. White suits on, helmets in hand. Everyone was assembled. Everyone except Izuku. He stood apart, armor on, arms crossed, shield on his back. Watching. Tony caught his eye. Izuku gave a small nod. Steve gave him a salute. Natasha simply smiled. Clint gave a thumbs up. They all knew what he meant to this team. As they stepped onto their platforms, ready to vanish through time, Izuku whispered quietly. Bring them home. And then, in a flash of white and light, they were gone. Izuku stood in the silence they left behind. And waited. Avengers Compound. Early morning. The air shimmered as the quantum platform sparked back to life. In a breath, the Lost reappeared. Clint, Bruce, Steve, Tony, Rocket, Scott, Nebula, and Rhodey. They returned in groups, some smiling, some battered, all victorious. And one short. Izuku was already in the bay when they arrived. His eyes searched every group with precise hope, only for it to slowly falter. No Natasha. His eyes met Clint's, and Clint looked broken. Izuku, he said quietly. Izuku stepped forward, armored boots echoing across the steel floor. Where's Nat? The silence was enough, but Clint still tried. She didn't come back. We tried. It was supposed to be me. The silence following Natasha's death lingered like a shadow over everyone. But the mission had to move forward. In the underground lab of the ruined compound, Tony, Bruce, Rocket, and Izuku worked together on the nano gauntlet. It shimmered with a dark, contained brilliance, 6 infinity stones embedded into a vibranium alloy shell, the circuitry glowing like a heartbeat. Deku stood nearby, arms crossed, still wearing his armored vibranium suit. The signature green accents pulsed faintly. His expression was unreadable, but the storm behind his eyes hadn't left since Clint told him the truth. Shuri's absence, T'Challa, Wanda, Peter, so many others, and now, Natasha. It was time to bring them back. Tony looked over the gauntlet and then at the team. This is it. Bruce nodded. I'm the only one who can take it. The radiation is mostly gamma. It's like, I was made for this. Everyone stepped back. Izuku didn't say anything. He simply placed his hand on Bruce's shoulder. Just hold on, he said quietly. They're counting on you. Bruce clenched his teeth, then slid his massive hand into the gauntlet. The nanotech expanded and fused with his skin, crawling up to his shoulder. The glow from the stones intensified. As the energy coursed through his body, Bruce roared in pain, his massive frame trembling. Now, Hulk, Tony shouted. With a cry of both agony and defiance, Bruce snapped his fingers. There was a pulse, light, sound, vibration. It was as if the world had briefly gone silent, then sighed. Birdsong. The sky cleared. A phone rang. Clint looked at his phone and choked on his breath. Laura. Hope shimmered in their eyes. Deku's head lifted, eyes glowing faintly as he sensed something. Wait. he whispered. Then the sky darkened again. A single missile screamed down from the clouds and obliterated the entire side of the compound. Boom! The shockwave blasted through everything. Steel twisted, walls crumbled, water burst from beneath the facility. The Avengers compound collapsed in a matter of seconds. The battlefield was born again. Ruins. Minutes later, smoke choked the air. Deku coughed, pinned beneath a collapsed beam. He gritted his teeth, activating 45% of One for All in a sudden surge. The beam lifted and he slid free, bruised but alive. He looked up, and froze. In the distance, a massive warship hovered above the wreckage like a demon casting its shadow over the earth. Thanos stood calmly just outside the crater, his double-bladed sword planted in the ground beside him. This wasn't the weary, beaten Titan they had seen before. This was a conqueror from the height of his ambition. Behind him, the Black Order had returned, but altered. This was past Thanos, a version brought forward by the betrayal of the alternate nebula. Deku stood and stared across the wasteland at the figure. Bruce emerged from the rubble, badly burned but conscious. Rocket was digging Clint out. Tony's armor reconfigured to stabilize his ribs. Steve climbed out from a gap, shield in hand. Thor flew down next, Stormbreaker crackling. His eyes met Deku's. "He's here," Deku said. Tony narrowed his eyes. "And this time, he knows everything." A massive figure stepped up behind Deku, Tempra, her sleek purple and silver armor glowing. The others soon followed. Jetburst, hovering in the air with pulse cannons charging. Ignis, molten energy flowing from its gauntlets. Vox, humming as it scanned the battlefield. Voltgeist, sparks of blue electricity curling around its frame. Phantom Gale, already cloaked and circling. Iron Snap, fists clanking together. Soulforge, silent and still like a sentinel. Awaiting orders, Izuku, Vox said with a voice that mirrored Ida's. "Get into defensive positions," Izuku ordered. "We hold the line." They responded in unison, moving like a unit across the scorched earth. Thanos watched them from afar. "Such resistance," he muttered. "It only ever delays the inevitable." He turned to his forces, an endless army of Outriders, Chitauri, Sokkaran soldiers, and even massive siege creatures. They poured out from the ship in droves, forming a wall of living destruction. "Send them in." Deku's fingers clenched. Behind him, Steve, Thor, and Tony lined up. Thunder cracked as Thor summoned both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. Tony's suit slid into battle mode. Steve checked his shield, then looked to Deku. "Ready." Izuku nodded. He took one last breath. "Then we make him pay," Tony said. And the final battle began. The wind howled through the broken skeleton of the Avengers compound. Amidst the smoldering craters and collapsed towers stood Thanos. He wore his full battle armor, scarred and battered from the past but gleaming all the same. His massive blade, lodged into the earth, marked the center of the battlefield like a war banner. He waited, calm, cruel, confident. Across from him, 4 figures emerged from the dust. Thor, his storm-wrapped frame glinting with arcs of thunder, stepped forward first. Tony Stark, silent inside the nanotech suit that molded around his wounds in defiance. Steve Rogers, shield strapped, jaw set like iron. And finally, Izuku Midoriya, not the boy who once fell into this world, but the man who rose from its ashes. His vibranium armor, darker now with crimson highlights, moved like a second skin. Along his back, his custom shield, trimmed in silver and green, caught the flickering light. One for All pulsed through him, disciplined, contained, and deadly. Thanos eyed the group, but his gaze lingered on Izuku. "You," the Titan said with faint amusement. Still standing, Izuku stepped forward. "Always." No more words. The battle began. Round 1. The initiative. Thor was the first to move, lightning spiraling across his cape as he hurled Stormbreaker. Thanos caught it midair, twisting his wrist to deflect it, only for Tony to slam into him from above, unleashing a barrage of repulsors. Cap swept in low, his shield catching Thanos behind the knee as Izuku launched from behind with gearshift, his movement impossible to track. Boom! His 100% Delaware smash cracked into Thanos' gauntlet, sending shockwaves down the Titan's arm and loosening his grip. Thanos staggered, surprised. Izuku didn't let up. Black Whip coiled around Thanos' leg like a serpent, and he yanked with brutal precision while calling out, "Steve! Now!" Cap leapt, shield out, and slammed it into Thanos' chest just as Tony unleashed an explosive overcharge from behind. For a moment, the Mad Titan was down. But not defeated. Round 2. The pushback. With a snarl, Thanos dug his hands into the earth and heaved, throwing debris into the air. He surged forward like a mountain in motion, catching Steve's shield mid-swing and slamming him into the ground. Tony tried to intercept, but Thanos threw a massive slab of concrete at him, sending him tumbling. Then Thanos turned to Midoriya. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Danger sense flared. He twisted at the last moment, avoiding a crushing backhand, and countered with a Fa Jin burst straight to Thanos' torso, following with gearshift top to rapidly shift positions around him like a blur. A ghost. A storm. He unleashed a flurry of St. Louis smashes, each one sharp, efficient, precise. Black whip blades lashed like whips of light. But Thanos was adapting, his instincts raw and ancient. He caught Izuku mid-flurry and hurled him into the rubble, stone cracking on impact. Izuku coughed, but got back up. Again. The clash of wills. The four regrouped. Thor's lightning surged. Tony hovered in the air, one eye cracked in his helmet. Cap stood beside Izuku, nodding silently. "I've fought gods," Steve muttered, "but I've never seen someone hit like you." Izuku gave a faint smile. "I trained with one." Together, they launched forward again. This time, they attacked in sync, Izuku and Tony weaving mid-air tactics, Cap using Mjolnir and his shield in tandem, Thor unleashing raw storms. The field cracked, fire lit the horizon, and slowly, Thanos began to yield ground. Until a beam struck the battlefield from above. Not magic, not repulsor tech, a summoning beacon. Thanos' army arrives. From above the hills beyond, ships descended. Drop pods crashed into the ruined battlefield. The sky turned dark again. The Outriders, the Chitauri, the Black Order, Thanos' entire army. "Damn it," Tony muttered. "I guess he brought company," Cap growled. Izuku didn't flinch. He pulled his shield from his back. The glowing vibranium lines pulsed to life. Behind them, over the hill, the Wakandan defenses reformed into position. And ahead of them, 8 mechs stepped forward. Towering AI machines forged of vibranium, infused with power and personality based on Izuku's friends from home. Each took their place across the battlefield, already moving as if they'd been part of the team for years. Vox, the tactician. Jetburst, the speedster. Ignis, the Inferno shield. Tempra, the temporal defender. Phantom Gale, the elusive windwalker. Iron Snap, the bruiser. Soulforge, the healer and anchor. Voltgeist, the electric spear. They each bore colors, voices, and combat styles that mirrored Izuku's beloved classmates. They weren't replacements. They were tributes, and they would fight to the end. Thanos stepped forward. He pointed at Izuku. "This time, I will end you." Izuku breathed deep. "You'll try." He raised his shield. One for all surged around him like a star going nova. For them. The battlefield cracked, the skies still swirling with smoke and ash. Thanos stood, his army stretching endlessly behind him. The Outriders screeched, the Black Order at his side once more. The heroes regrouped, battered, bloodied, and breathless. Cap's broken shield hung from his arm. Thor stood tall, beard burning with stormlight, Stormbreaker and Mjolnir in hand. Izuku Midoriya exhaled slowly, dirt and blood smudged across his face, his vibranium armor glowing from fractures. One for all surged inside him, boiling, focused. Then, the portal opened, and another, from Wakanda, New Asgard, Titan, space, and Earth's corners, heroes poured in. Okoye, Valkyrie, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Star-Lord, Giant Man, Bucky, Pepper in full rescue armor, Wasp, Korg, Drax, Rocket, Clint, everyone who was lost returned. Wanda floated down in front of the army, beside Vision, his new body humming with light. The 8 mechs, Vox, Jetburst, Ignis, Tempra, Phantom Gale, Iron Snap, Soulforge, and Voltgeist, lined up in formation behind Deku, their glowing eyes pulsing with power. Then the dust settled. Silence. Cap stood at the front. Then, a voice. Izuku's voice. Low, powerful, resolute. "Avengers." He looked across the army. His voice rose. "Assemble." He launched forward. Stormbreaker flew to him. Thor tossing it like a gift. Deku caught it midair, and for one blinding moment, the storm wrapped around him like it had waited for him. Final battle. All forces united. It was chaos. Hero clashed with beast. Mech against Leviathan. Gods battled generals. Spells collided with blasters. Shields deflected magic. Lightning struck steel. Vox coordinated aerial tactics. Voltgeist electrified an entire flank. Jetburst blurred through enemies faster than Spider-Man. Iron Snap slammed down like a meteor. Soulforge raised fallen soldiers. Tempra created momentary rewinds to save comrades. Ignis incinerated a battalion in one roar. And Izuku was everywhere. He wielded Stormbreaker for a time, fighting side by side with Thor, trading off between shield strikes and thunder-infused punches. Then, returning the weapon to Thor, he leapt to support Spider-Man, catching him just before he was struck. "Nice suit," Peter said. "Yours too," Izuku smiled. "Stay close." He launched Spider-Man with Black Whip, then turned to fight Cull Obsidian, shattering the brute's weapon with a Manchester smash. Wanda and Vision teamed up on Proxima Midnight, while the mechs took down the last of the Outriders. The final moment. The stones. Thanos surged forward, determined. He caught Tony mid-flight and hurled him into the ground. Thor tried to strike, but Thanos disarmed him, throwing Stormbreaker into his chest and holding it there, until Cap's shield struck again and again. Then, Izuku appeared behind him, one hand sparking with Fa Jin, the other holding his custom vibranium shield. He roared, "Detroit Smash!" Thanos reeled, but in the confusion, he snatched the Stark Gauntlet, pulling the stones into his new weapon. Tony reached for it, his nanotech wrapping around the stones. But they wouldn't lock. Thanos shoved him aside, cracking the ground beneath Tony. "No," Tony wheezed. Then, a streak of green. Izuku. He appeared between Thanos and the gauntlet. His armor responded, reshaping, adapting. Click. The stones latched onto Deku's armor, each locking into ports built for this moment. A faint whir echoed from his chest. His fingers flexed. The light of the Infinity Stones flared across his body. Gold, red, green, purple, blue, orange. One for all surged in tandem, keeping the energy contained. He looked up, shaking from the force. Thanos watched in disbelief. "What are you?" Izuku's voice was low, controlled, steady. "My name is Izuku Midoriya and this for all you have done." Thanos lunged. Deku raised his hand. The armor adjusted into the snap position. The stones crackled. He whispered, not in arrogance, but with quiet purpose. "One for all." And he snapped his fingers. Ashes and silence. Thanos' army froze. One by one, the beasts, the ships, the generals, crumbled into dust. The sky began to clear. Thanos looked at his army disintegrating, and sat. As the light left his eyes, his expression hollow, he faded to dust. The battle was over. The sky above Wakanda had turned from smoke and flame to a wounded gray. Sunlight filtered in through cracks in the storm. All around the battlefield, warriors stood in silence. Chitauri beasts lay scattered in ash. Thanos' armor sat unmoving in the distance. And Izuku Midoriya stood in the center, his hand slowly lowering after the snap that changed the universe. His breath came steady, his armor steamed, faint cracks of prismatic color glowing before fading into silence. He winced once, holding his shoulder, but he was still standing. And most importantly, he was alive. "You did it." Thor and Tony approached first. Thor looked him up and down, then gave a half laugh. "You're still here." Izuku gave a small smile, the weight of what he'd done just starting to settle. "Wasn't easy. Wasn't supposed to be," Tony said. "But you pulled it off." Deku glanced down at his armor. The 6 Infinity Stones embedded in his chestplate now pulsed with fading energy. Slowly, he touched the center of his suit, and the stones detached with a soft click into a circular containment sphere made of vibranium and reinforced alloys. Bruce came forward, more solemn. "We'll hold onto them for now," he said quietly. "Until we can rebuild the time machine. Take them back." Izuku nodded and handed the sphere to Bruce, who sealed it in a containment vault already prepared by Wakandan scientists. "They can't stay here forever," Izuku said. "They won't," Bruce promised. "We'll fix this. All of it." The funeral. A few hours passed. The battlefield cleared. The injured were tended to. But not all losses could be healed. At the edge of a Wakandan cliff, overlooking a great waterfall, the Avengers and allies gathered. The air was still. The sky was blue again. But grief hung heavier than smoke ever had. A small altar stood in the center, adorned with black flowers and silver threads of vibranium. In its center, a simple photograph of Natasha Romanoff. Her expression was still, her smile gentle. T'Challa's mother led the ceremony in her native tongue before stepping back. The group stood in silence. Wanda, Clint, Steve, Bruce, Bucky, Rocket, Okoye, M'Baku, Valkyrie, Pepper, even Rhodey kept his head bowed. Izuku stood near the front. Still in his armor, helmet off, the wind brushing through his green hair. He hadn't said anything yet. Not since they'd returned. Not since she was gone. Finally, after everyone had stepped back, Izuku moved forward. Izuku's words. He looked at the photo for a long moment. Then, he spoke softly. I wasn't from this world when I met her. I didn't know how to trust people at first. I didn't know how to be part of a team. But she did. She saw through every wall I tried to put up, and made me laugh anyway. Made me feel like I belonged. He paused. She fought for us long before I even arrived. She kept us together when we were breaking apart. And in the end, she gave everything. Just like that. No hesitation. That's the kind of hero I always wanted to be. His voice cracked slightly, but he smiled. She gave me advice once. Told me, don't forget to live in between the battles. I didn't really understand what that meant until now. But I'm going to try. For her. He stepped back, and placed something small beside the photo. A vibranium ring, simple and smooth, crafted during his first years in Wakanda. Natasha had once joked about how it didn't suit him. But she'd worn it on her necklace since he gave it to her. The sky over the waterfall. The crowd remained silent, until Clint stepped forward and said the final words. She was family. The best of us. She always will be. They released white flowers into the river that flowed below. Dozens floated out into the mist, carried by the current. After that night, Izuku stood with Tony and Pepper beneath the Wakandan stars. Morgan Stark, barefoot in the grass, reached up and tugged on Izuku's armored glove. Are you going away again? He knelt. Not today, Morgan. She smiled. Good. And for a moment, just a moment, the world was quiet again. 1 month later, Wakanda's skies were bright again. The wounds of war still lingered, but the world was healing. Slowly, quietly, together, in a courtyard carved from ancient stone and woven with advanced Wakandan tech, Izuku Midoriya stood beneath a tree whose blossoms glowed faintly in the sunlight. A wind rustled through the leaves, gentle and warm, but heavy with change. This was the place where he'd made his decision. To return home. The mission. Tony, Bruce, Rocket, and Wakandan scientists had spent weeks studying the quantum tunnel, rebuilding it from scratch, mapping the quantum currents, and adjusting for dimensional drift. It wasn't just about sending someone back in time anymore. It was about sending Deku home, across realities. We mapped the coordinates back to the energy surge when you first arrived, Bruce explained. It's risky. We can only charge this thing once. But it'll take you to the exact moment you left your world. Just like that, Deku had asked. It's the best shot we've got. Preparing for departure, Izuku packed quietly, alone in his lab one last time. His upgraded vibranium armor stood nearby, its green glow a little softer now, almost peaceful. He reached toward a panel. 8 slim data chips clicked into place inside the storage unit on his back. Vox, Jetburst, Ignis, Tempera, Phantom Gale, Iron Snap, Soulforge, Voltgeist. The AI mechs, modeled after his classmates and their powers, were going home with him, so their spirits could live on in his world. Next, he added a freshly refined vibranium core, gifted to him by Wakandan engineers. It pulsed softly like an arc reactor, stable, clean, endless. He slipped his custom shield onto his back, traced in the green and white of his hero colors, worn with pride. And finally, he placed a single heart-shaped herb inside a preserved stasis capsule. It shimmered with ancient power and purpose. A return, not an escape. Before he left, Izuku asked to meet one more time with Queen Ramonda and the Wakandan Council. He bowed his head respectfully. I used one of the heart-shaped herbs. I shouldn't have, not without permission. But I had no choice. Ramonda looked at him for a long moment, and then approached him, placing her hand on his shoulder. You bore the weight of kingship in our darkest hour, Izuku. And you never once called yourself king. That is why we accepted it. T'Challa left a letter. Before the battle, she continued. If he fell, and you lived, he wished for you to carry the mantle until Wakanda could stand again. Deku's voice was quiet. Then I'll return it now. To him, she nodded. A private goodbye. T'Challa met him on the cliff where they'd said goodbye to Natasha. The Black Panther once again wore his own armor, but there was something calmer in his expression now. Izuku bowed, then stood tall. I don't think I was ever meant to stay here forever, he said. But I want Wakanda to live on. To protect itself. To grow even stronger. He stepped forward and handed over a sealed box containing a second heart-shaped herb and a small stone etched with both Wakandan and Japanese glyphs. If someone worthy rises in the future, let them carry the power. Let them protect what matters. T'Challa took it gently. And you, Izuku smiled. I'll carry your legacy with me. T'Challa returned the gesture, holding out a folded cloth. Inside were 3 parting gifts. A ceremonial Wakandan necklace, a forged ring of panther steel, and a smooth stone etched with the phrase. Even in another world, Wakanda remembers. Goodbyes. The Avengers gathered at the rebuilt quantum platform near Wakanda's edge. Steve placed the containment unit with 3 of the Infinity Stones on the pad. Thor and Valkyrie delivered the remaining ones. All 6 hummed faintly. Deku stood nearby, his armor fully sealed, helmet off. His green eyes looked around at his friends. No, his family, one last time. Pepper hugged him tightly. You're welcome at our table. Always. Bruce offered a rare, warm nod. Make sure you live a little, Deku. Thor grinned. You ever want to conquer a realm, give me a call. Tony was the last to speak. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. You saved this world. I don't know what your world's like, kid. But if it's got people like you in it, it's already lucky. He smirked. Just don't let them work you to death again. And tell Momo I said she's got a good head on her shoulders. Izuku smiled, blinking back emotion. I'll tell her. The platform hummed to life. Energy surged through the tunnel. Okay, Rocket said, checking readings. You've got one shot. Wherever this thing's taking you, it's now. Deku stepped up onto the pad. He gave one last look over his shoulder. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. Then, with a deep breath, he nodded to Bruce. And disappeared in a shimmer of light. The sky over Musudafu shimmered for a brief second, like static on the edge of the world. A golden crack of energy opened midair, then collapsed with a thunderous pop, leaving behind only the sound of night, and a figure clad in deep green and black armor standing atop a nondescript rooftop. His helmet was down. His eyes, though calm, were filled with the weight of something heavy, ancient. The glowing blue arc reactor in his chest hummed quietly, surrounded by thin lines of pulsating energy coursing through the vibranium suit. His body moved like a man both trained and tortured. He looked around. No Avengers Tower, no Wakandan skyline, no tech-filled compound, just home. Musudafu. His lips parted slightly, no words coming out. The city was calm, too calm. It felt like a dream. Then his eyes widened. The rooftop I was taken from. Without hesitation, he pushed into a burst of speed. The armor responded instantly, nanites adjusting around his limbs as gearshift activated. The skyline blurred past him as he raced toward UA, his instincts guiding him even though his heart told him it couldn't be real. It's only been seconds, right? He arrived near the school perimeter. He slowed down just before hitting the wall, landing in the courtyard with a light step. But then, the sirens started. An alarm blared overhead. The automated defense system hummed to life, cameras locking onto him, red lights flashing. I don't have my ID, of course. That was 11 years ago. He raised his hand slowly, trying not to provoke anything. The system scanned him, briefly stalled, then triggered the emergency alert. A moment later, 2 massive power signatures lit up the horizon. One flame-fueled and furious. The other, gaunt, but unmistakable. Endeavor and All Might landed with heavy impacts, wind kicking up in the courtyard. Endeavor's voice cut through the air like a blade. You have 10 seconds to explain who you are before I blast you into the wall. The armored figure said nothing. He stayed still, shoulders square, his stance eerily familiar. All Might's sharp gaze narrowed. Why does he seem familiar? The armored figure remained silent, his face hidden behind the helmet. His breath was steady. Endeavor stepped forward. You're not saying anything. Is that arrogance, or cowardice? But before anyone could act, a third force arrived, louder, sharper, and with significantly less patience. Bakugo Katsuki landed with an explosion at his feet, smoke trailing off his gauntlets. The hell is going on? What's with the nighttime Terminator cosplay? He looked at the armored figure and scoffed. What? You forget Halloween was last month. Still, the figure didn't speak. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, picking up something familiar in the posture. The shoulders, the stance, the quiet patience in how he stood, as if calculating 20 different angles of how to defuse the situation, or survive it. Wait. All Might took a step forward too, concern growing in his face. Endeavor grunted. You're wasting our time. I say we. The armored figure finally moved, slowly. His hand came up to the side of his helmet. A soft ripple of nanites peeled the mask away. And green eyes met theirs. Familiar eyes. Haunted, older, tired, but unmistakably Midoriya Izuku. The courtyard went dead silent. All Might staggered. Endeavor's flame flickered once, visibly faltering. Bakugo, for once, didn't yell. His voice was hoarse. No damn way. Izuku finally spoke, quietly. It's me. All Might stepped forward, his voice trembling. Midoriya, but how? You vanished. Izuku's expression stayed still. For you, 11 hours. For me, 11 years. Bakugo looked away, blinking rapidly. Bullshit. Izuku lowered his gaze. Wish it was. The silence stretched again, broken only by the faint sound of wind and the hum of the suit's energy cells. Bakugo finally snapped. Then where the hell have you been, huh? You disappear without a trace. No note, no signal, no All Might tracking device, and now you come back looking like some kind of space knight with a tragic backstory. Izuku offered a dry, almost regretful smile. You're not too far off. Endeavor folded his arms. That armor isn't standard issue. I built it, over time. Vibranium from another world. Arc reactor. I needed it. All Might's voice was softer now. Are you hurt? Izuku shook his head. Not anymore. Bakugo clenched a fist. Why didn't you say anything when we showed up, dumbass? Izuku's response was simple. I wasn't sure I was really home. That hit harder than any explosion. Bakugo huffed, turning away. Well, you sure know how to make an entrance. Then he looked back over his shoulder, voice quieter. TCH. You better be ready to talk. To all of us. Izuku nodded slowly. I will. Everything. About the war. The snap. What I did. Who we lost. What I brought back. All Might gave him a somber nod. And what you became. Izuku's eyes turned to the sky. I'm still figuring that out. Endeavor's flames dimmed slightly. Come inside. But we'll keep the security on standby, for now. As the three turned to enter UA, Izuku stood still for a moment longer. I'm finally home. But I'm not the same boy who left this place. His hand gently touched the green and black shield on his back, the one he forged beside T'Challa, in a different world. He took a breath, and followed them inside. The room was still humming with shock after Izuku's confession. His words lingered in the air like smoke. 11 years of battles, friendships, and losses that none of them could even begin to imagine. Class 1A sat in silence, some leaning forward, some leaning back, all staring at the boy who had returned looking like a man. It was Kaminari who broke the silence first, rubbing the back of his neck. So, when you said you built ice of us, like, little robot versions, did they talk like us? Act like us? Izuku's gaze dropped to the chips in front of him. His hand brushed one lightly. They weren't perfect copies, but they sounded like you. Fought like you, even argued like you. It kept me from losing myself when I was alone. Mina swallowed hard, her usual energy dimmed. That's kind of sweet. And really sad. Iida adjusted his glasses, his voice unusually quiet. Midoriya, you bore these burdens with no one but strangers at your side. For 11 years, your perseverance is astounding. But, his words faltered, it's also terrifying. You shouldn't have had to. Todoroki leaned forward, studying him with sharp, mismatched eyes. You're stronger now, I can see it, but, are you okay? You said you don't know how to live here anymore. Izuku hesitated, then shook his head. No, I'm not okay. I don't think I have been for a long time. The honesty stung them more than any false reassurance would have. Ochako stood abruptly, fists clenched. But you're back now, Deku. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. We're here, we're your friends. We're not gonna just let you break yourself again. Her voice trembled, but the conviction in it was undeniable. Izuku looked up at her, and for the first time since his return, his eyes softened. Zero leaned back in his chair, exhaling. So you fought aliens, gods, robots, and some purple grape guy who could snap people out of existence. He shook his head. Man, that makes our training camp villains look like toddlers. That earned a few weak chuckles, tension cracking for just a second. Hiroshima leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. But you made it, bro. That's what counts. You came back. You fought all of that and you're still standing. That's seriously manly. Izuku managed a faint, tired smile. Bakugo remained silent, his arms folded tight. His eyes burned holes into Izuku, but he said nothing. His restraint spoke louder than his explosions ever could. All Might watched it unfold, pride and sorrow warring in his expression. Endeavor stood in the back, arms crossed, still skeptical but no longer voicing it. Finally, All Might cleared his throat. His voice was soft. There's someone else who deserves to see you, young Midoriya. The door opened. Inko Midoriya stepped into the room, confusion etched on her face. Her eyes darted between the students, then to the armored figure sitting among them. She hesitated. Toshinori, you said my son was here, but... Her voice trembled. I don't see him. The room went silent. Izuku couldn't move, and then her eyes found his. Recognition was instant. No hesitation, no doubt. Her lips parted, and tears welled. Izuku. The name hit him like lightning. He half rose, stunned. How can you tell? I look. Inko's voice broke through his disbelief, gentle and fierce all at once. Mother's instinct. It was over. The dam shattered. Izuku stumbled forward, armor clattering faintly as his knees nearly gave out. He fell into her arms, burying his face against her shoulder, shaking violently as years of restraint collapsed. I thought I'd never see you again. I lost so many. His words dissolved into sobs. Inko held him tighter than she ever had before. You're home. That's all that matters. You're home, my baby. The class watched in silence, many of them blinking back tears. They had never seen Izuku break like this. Not in training, not against villains, not even during his darkest moments. But now, in his mother's arms, he let everything go. All Might turned away, hand pressed to his mouth, his shoulders shaking with restrained emotion. Bakugo clenched his fists so hard his knuckles went white, his scowl failing to mask the storm inside him. Ochako pressed a hand to her chest, tears running freely down her cheeks. Even Endeavor lowered his gaze, silent, the scene piercing through even his hardened exterior. Inko stroked Izuku's hair, rocking him slightly as if he were still the little boy who once clutched All Might figures in his hands. You've been through so much. But you don't have to explain it all right now. You don't have to be strong. Just let me hold you. And Izuku, who had carried universes on his shoulders, who had stood against gods and titans, who had lived 11 years of war, finally allowed himself to be nothing more than a son. The room stayed hushed, no one daring to interrupt. The weight of his journey, the pain of his years, and the relief of his return hung heavy in the air. For the first time since coming back, Izuku wasn't a soldier, or a hero, or a survivor. He was just Izuku Midoriya. And he was home. The faculty room at UA was tense. Aizawa sat with his usual tired glare, arms folded, as Nezu poured tea into his small porcelain cup. The rest of the faculty, Midnight, Present Mike, Smintos, Recovery Girl, Vlad King, watched the flickering holographic projection of Izuku Midoriya. Or rather, the man who had returned in his place. He wasn't the boy who had vanished 11 hours ago. He stood straighter, scarred in places, with the heavy aura of someone who had lived through more battles than any of them could imagine. His vibranium suit was deactivated, resting in a sleek, nanite band around his wrist, but even without it, the weight of his presence filled the room. All Might, still in his skinny form, leaned forward. We have to decide what comes next for young Midoriya. He's not the same boy. Not even close, Recovery Girl muttered. His body, his mind, they've been tempered by over a decade of combat. 11 years of living as a hero, and somehow still standing. The question is, does he even belong in Class 1A anymore? Midnight tilted her head. With that much experience, he could be teaching us. Teaching isn't the same as surviving, Aizawa countered. He may have fought in a war, but he's carrying damage. You can see it in the way he scans every corner of the room like we're all about to attack him. Nezu sipped his tea, eyes gleaming. Perhaps he should remain among his peers, for stability, for a reminder that he's still young. But perhaps, he could walk both paths. Izuku hadn't spoken the entire time, his hands folded tightly in his lap. When they turned to him, he finally lifted his head. I don't know where I belong, he admitted softly. His voice was deeper, rasped from years of shouting in battles, but beneath it, the tremor of the boy they remembered still lingered. I want to be with my friends again. But I don't know if I can go back to being just a student. The silence was heavy, the decision unresolved. Attempting normal, Izuku moved into the dorms of Class 1A a week later. The halls were familiar, but walking them felt like stepping into a museum of a life that wasn't his anymore. At dinner, the others crowded him with questions, voices full of excitement, but Izuku forced smiles that didn't reach his eyes. When Kaminari accidentally dropped a plate, the crash made Izuku's hand twitch to summon his armor. When someone slammed the common room door too hard, he flinched, jaw clenching, memories of collapsing cities flooding back. When news about international crime groups scrolled across the TV, he had to excuse himself before panic bubbled up. He trained obsessively in Gym Gamma, running simulations, burning through One for All at 100% as though the fight never ended. Bakugo would sometimes watch silently from the upper railings, frowning but never saying anything. When things became too much, Izuku locked himself in his dorm. His room was reinforced with Wakandan tech, walls lined with dampeners and fail-safes, both to contain him during panic attacks and to make sure no one saw him break. Mandatory therapy sessions with Hound Dog became routine. Izuku would sit, tense, and give clinical reports of his life. Hound Dog would bark, push, dig, but Izuku always deflected. I'm fine. I've handled worse. This isn't as bad as what I saw there. The counselor scribbled notes, shielding with false optimism. Severe survivor's guilt, trauma unresolved. The license. 1 month later, UA held a quiet ceremony. Nezu presented Izuku with his pro-hero license. You earned this many times over, Nezu said with a rare gentleness. Let this be official recognition of what you've already proven. The license didn't read Deku. It bore his new name that he made, Sentinel. His classmates clapped, cheered, patted his back. Mina shouted that they needed to throw a party. Even Aizawa gave him a nod of approval. Izuku smiled, accepted the license, but later that night, alone in his dorm, he stared at the card under the dim light. Sentinel, a name forged in war, not youth. A name that means to protect those who are unable to protect themselves. But to him it felt like holding a trophy for a race he didn't even remember running. Empty. The breaking point. 2 months in, the nightmares worsened. Izuku woke drenched in sweat, screaming names no one recognized. In those moments, his armor sometimes activated on reflex, wrapping him in a cocoon of black and green plates, claws extended like a cornered animal. The others tried not to talk about it. Iida suggested they respect his privacy. But Uraraka cried quietly in the kitchen one night, whispering to Tsuyu, he's here with us, but it feels like we lost him anyway. Even Inko noticed. She visited whenever she could, cooking for Class 1A, trying to make her son feel normal. But Izuku always wore the same tired smile, always tried to reassure her, and she always saw through it. His birthday. When his 17th birthday rolled around for Class 1A, Izuku was turning 28. They threw a surprise party anyway. Balloons filled the common room, cake stacked high, everyone yelling, "Happy birthday!" He laughed, genuinely surprised, and for a moment, the weight seemed to lift. They played games, told jokes, sang off-key. For everyone else, it was a normal celebration. But when Izuku looked in the mirror later that night, surrounded by streamers and empty cups, he saw a stranger staring back. A man in his late 20s. A man who had fought wars, lost comrades, wielded infinity stones, buried friends. Not the boy who once dreamed of All Might's smile. His classmates whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. He smiles, but it doesn't feel real. He laughs with us, but his eyes look so tired. It's like he's hiding behind something. And they were right. Izuku carried a shield, but not the vibranium one strapped to his back. A shield made of false smiles, endless training, and the hope that if he pretended long enough, maybe he could forget. Inko watched from the corner, smiling for everyone's sake, but her heart broke piece by piece. This was her son, alive, back in her arms, but he was no longer the bright-eyed boy who used to cry over All Might posters. He was a soldier, a survivor, a broken child trapped in a man's body. And she didn't know if she, or anyone, could fix him. The reintegration of Izuku Midoriya had begun. But the question remained, was he truly back? Or had the MCU carved away too much for him to ever be whole again? But one thing is for sure, the Izuku that came back is not the one that left all that time ago. The conference. The grand hall in Tokyo buzzed with the press of cameras, flashing bulbs, and the murmur of gathered heroes. The Hero Public Safety Commission had called an emergency conference, with the nation's top pros assembled to discuss intelligence leaks about a brewing catastrophe, the Paranormal Liberation Front and their hidden weapons. Izuku stood at the edge of the stage, arms folded, his black and green armor deactivated to a wristband at his side. He was still adjusting to being seen again, to being in the spotlight instead of lurking in shadows like a soldier. The title Sentinel was already spreading through the hero community, a whispered name given weight by his feats since returning. That was when he noticed her. Rumi Usajiyama. Mirko, the rabbit hero, stood with her trademark smirk, arms flexed casually as though daring anyone to test her. She was fire and freedom embodied, unyielding and blunt. But her crimson eyes kept drifting toward him, narrowing in curiosity. Later, during a quieter break, All Might found her. His thin frame trembled slightly as he leaned on a cane, but his voice carried its old authority. "Rumi, about Midoriya." She raised an eyebrow. "The new guy. The one who looks like he's seen 100 wars. Because he has," All Might admitted. "He vanished, lived 11 years in another world, and returned only hours later here. He's not the boy he once was. He needs grounding. Someone who can challenge him physically, and reach him personally." Her ears twitched. "And you're saying that's me?" All Might gave her a small, weary smile. "You've never been afraid to dive straight at the impossible. That's exactly the kind of spirit he needs." When Mirko glanced back toward Izuku, her instincts stirred. Something primal inside her screamed that this man, scarred, hardened, yet standing tall, was worth chasing. Sparring grounds. Days later, Mirko cornered him in UA's training dome. "Oi, Sentinel," she called, deliberately ignoring the name Deku. "You're strong, yeah, prove it." Izuku looked up from calibrating his armor. His expression was guarded, but a flicker of interest crossed his face. "You want to spar?" "No, I want to fight," Mirko corrected with a toothy grin. Their clash shook the dome. Her raw power and relentless style hammered against his honed precision. He dodged with float, countered with black whip, accelerated with gear shift, but she kept coming, forcing him to unleash just enough to match her ferocity. For the first time since his return, Izuku felt alive in combat, not haunted by ghosts, but anchored by someone who met his blows without fear. Between strikes, Mirko's grin widened. "Yeah, this is it. This is my prey." And beneath his soldier's mask, Izuku almost smiled back. The hospital raid. Weeks later, the call came. Intel confirmed Dr. Kyudai Garaki's hideout beneath Jaku General Hospital. High-end Nomu were waiting. The heroes assembled for a raid that could decide the nation's fate. Mirko stood at the front, fists clenched. Sentinel took position beside her, silent, a storm contained. The assault began in chaos. High-end Nomu burst from containment, snarling monstrosities tearing through walls and heroes alike. Mirko leapt headlong into the fray, kicking one back with a crack of shattered concrete. But when two more lunged, jaws gaping, Izuku was there, vibranium shield raised, black whip lashing them aside before they could rip her apart. "Stay alive, Mirko," he growled, voice steady but urgent. She spat blood, grinning. Wouldn't miss the show. But the real terror began when Shigaraki awoke. Decay spread like wildfire, turning the ground, walls, and heroes into dust. Screams filled the air as the wave of disintegration raced outward. Izuku's instincts took over. Float surged beneath his feet as Black Whip lashed in every direction, pulling pro-heroes out of range, dragging civilians who had been too close to safety. He layered FA Jin and gearshift to move faster, 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 until the wave finally stopped short of him. Everyone survived, except the doctor's last human shield near Shigaraki, already consumed. Izuku landed, armor battered, eyes locked on the villain. Shigaraki. The battle that followed was titanic. Izuku unleashed One for All at its peak, his fists hammering Shigaraki blow for blow. For moments, it seemed Sentinel would finish him. But then the Nomu surged toward the injured, snarling and relentless. Izuku's heart clenched. Save them or finish him. He chose. Float, gearshift, FA Jin, all combined into a blur of motion as he intercepted the Nomus, shield glistening, Black Whip flaring to drag the wounded to safety. By the time the last survivor was clear, Shigaraki was gone, vanished into the shadows. Izuku stood in the ruins, chest heaving, motionless. Even with all this power, I still couldn't save everyone. What's power for, if it can't protect them all? Behind him, Mirko stirred, barely conscious after being knocked out. She limped toward him, bloodied but alive, and placed a hand on his arm. "Hey, Sentinel," she murmured, eyes softening in a way few had ever seen. "You kept me breathing. You kept them breathing. Don't forget that." For a moment, the soldier in him faltered. Aftermath. The following days were grim. News reports spoke of a death toll in the thousands, maybe more. Entire districts destroyed by decay. Dozens of heroes resigned, overwhelmed by the scale of loss. But one name echoed through every headline. Sentinel. The devastation was immeasurable, a reporter said gravely, but thanks to the debuting pro-hero Sentinel, countless lives were saved. His intervention reduced what could have been total annihilation. Many families in Japan thanked him. The screen flicked off. In his dorm, Izuku sat on the floor, stripped of armor, stripped of symbols. Just a worn All Might hoodie hung off his frame, one he had found long ago and kept. His eyes were hollow, staring at nothing. Mirko stepped out of the bathroom, towel slung over her shoulders. She froze when she saw him like that, empty, soulless, a man broken beyond repair. Her chest tightened, but her instincts, sharper than any logic, whispered fiercely, "No matter what, I'll keep him standing. I'll bring him back. He's mine." She crouched beside him, hand brushing his shoulder. "My Zuku." And though he didn't move, didn't speak, she stayed. Determined. Somewhere far away, Shigaraki trembled in rage and fear. If Sentinel had chosen to end the fight instead of saving others, Tamura would already be dead. The clatter of tools echoed through UA's support lab as Momo Yaoyorozu adjusted her gloves, carefully setting the blueprint down on her desk. Izuku stood across from her, his shield propped against the wall, his armor deactivated into its sleek nanite band. "You're asking me to create more vibranium?" Momo frowned, tapping her chin. "Midoriya, you know that's not something I can just fabricate endlessly. It takes an enormous amount of stamina and energy reserves. What do you need so much for?" Izuku hesitated, his eyes, dimmed but sharp, fixed on the half-finished plates of his armor. Repairs. Contingencies. If the armor fails in battle, I can't afford to be useless." "That's fair," Momo admitted. She looked at him carefully, studying the dark circles under his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders. "But you'll come back here if you need more, right? Don't just carry everything yourself." Izuku gave her the same practiced smile he gave everyone these days. Of course, she didn't notice how tightly his fists clenched behind his back. "I can't. Not anymore." By the end of the week, she had crafted enough reserves for him to reforge his armor, reinforced with new fail-safes. Izuku thanked her quietly, strapped on the repaired suit, and disappeared into the night. When Class 1A woke the next morning, his dorm room was empty. The Vanishing Sentinel. 1 month passed. News reports dominated the airwaves. Sentinel, the new pro-hero real name Izuku Midoriya, continues his relentless crusade. He has been spotted across multiple prefectures, intercepting villains, rescuing civilians, and dismantling black market operations. Images flashed of a dark figure soaring above collapsed skyscrapers, his shield gleaming in the chaos, Black Whip snapping villains into submission. But, another report cautioned, eyewitnesses claim Sentinel seems different. His movements are sharper, harsher. Civilians describe him as more weapon than man. And despite his effectiveness, concerns are rising about his condition. A female reporter leaned forward at her desk, voice quiet but pointed. We ask heroes to save, to protect, to shelter us. But who shelters them? Who saves the heroes when they break? The screen faded to black. The broken city, the ruins of Hosu City groaned in silence. Smoke still curled from collapsed towers, streets littered with abandoned cars and the remnants of a panicked exodus. The night was heavy, suffocating, until a flash of cyan split the darkness. Something moved faster than sight, streaking between shattered buildings. A blur, leaving a trail of light in its wake. The air rippled with the crack of displaced wind as the figure stopped atop a ruined skyscraper. Sentinel. His armor had changed. Jagged vibranium spikes jutted from the back of his head, an animalistic silhouette designed to terrify. The cyan glow of his suit pulsed faintly, casting a ghostly aura across the ruins. To the villains who still dared to prowl the wreckage, he was no longer just a hero, he was a hunter. One whispered, trembling, "It's him. Sentinel. The monster who doesn't sleep." Izuku's breathing was steady, controlled. His gaze scanned the city below, danger sense prickling like fire across his nerves. He could feel them, villains, scavengers, parasites preying on the broken remnants of society. His thoughts narrowed into a single refrain. If I can get rid of them, I can rebuild this society that was broken by its hope. He leapt from the tower, Black Whip flaring, float carrying him forward. The cyan streak cut through the night again, faster, sharper, more merciless than ever. And above the empty streets, whispers spread like wildfire. Sentinel had become something else. Not a savior, not a symbol, a reckoning. The edge of collapse. A month had passed since Sentinel had vanished from public life. Izuku had not slept. He had not eaten. He had not even paused to clean himself. His vibranium armor, once a sleek second skin, was streaked with grime and blood, glowing faintly with cyan streaks where the nanites fought to maintain functionality. He moved like a shadow through the ruins of the city, eyes scanning for villains, limbs driven purely by habit. Danger sense flared constantly, muscles a coiled spring, nerves raw from months of constant alertness. And then, in a narrow alley, his body finally betrayed him. He collapsed mid-pursuit, knees buckling beneath him. The villains, noticing their target down, surged forward with grins of anticipation. But the armor didn't falter. One launched a sharp pipe, striking Sentinel's chest with a dull clang and bouncing harmlessly away. Another lunged, only to be flung backward by a pulse of kinetic energy as Izuku's Black Whip lashed without conscious thought, sending him spinning into a wall. The remaining villains froze. And then, above them, the unmistakable figure of Mirko appeared. Mirko's intervention. She landed atop one of the stunned criminals, boots scraping concrete. Her crimson eyes bore into the others as she growled, "Get off him. He's mine." In a blur of motion, she tore through the remaining villains with ruthless efficiency. The echoes of impact reverberated off the walls as bodies flew, groaning and defeated. Within moments, the alley was silent except for Izuku's ragged breathing. Mirko crouched beside him. "Come on," she said softly, lifting him with surprising strength. "You're coming with me. No arguments." Sanctuary. Her apartment was quiet, warm, and far removed from the chaos of the streets. Izuku was laid on a couch, armor still active but conserving energy. He drifted in and out of consciousness, finally succumbing to sleep. A day later, he woke, body aching and stomach growling. Mirko handed him a towel and said firmly, "Rest. Gain your strength." A dead man can't help anyone, least of all himself. The water ran hot over him as he stepped into the shower, washing away weeks of grime, sweat, and the remnants of battle. For the first time in months, he felt weak. And for the first time, he didn't fight against it. When he emerged, clad in clean clothes, Mirko set a plate of food before him. They ate in silence at first, then slowly, conversation trickled in. He told her of the raids, the unrelenting pressure, the sleepless nights. She listened, never judging, never pushing, just present. The silence between them became comforting. By the time he had rested for several more hours and cleaned his armor, Izuku felt stronger, clearer. Departure. He moved to leave. Mirko stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You're not going out there like that," she said, voice trembling. "You can't keep pushing yourself." Izuku raised a hand. Using gearshift, he accelerated the movement just enough to touch her shoulder. Her body froze mid-step. He looked at her tear-streaked face for a moment, eyes softened, and whispered, "I can't stop." Then he was gone, leaping into the night as cyan streaks cut through the darkness. Mirko stood frozen, tears flowing freely. "I can't let you die. I just can't." Confrontation looms. By dawn, Sentinel was moving through another broken district when he saw them. Class 1A, assembled, ready, eyes sharp with a mixture of shock, fear, and determination. Izuku slowed, breathing steady but mind conflicted. He didn't want to fight them, not really, but he knew the path he had chosen. He tightened his fists, adjusted his vibranium armor, and allowed Blackwhip and Float to hum with power. For a moment, he looked at them all, his friends, his past, the world he had left behind. And then, with a calm born of countless battles, he whispered to himself, "I have to do this." The fight was about to begin. The streets of the ruined district shimmered with cyan light as Sentinel, Izuku Midoriya, moved through the ruins. The wind whipped around his vibranium armor, spikes along the back of his head casting harsh shadows. He thought of nothing but the next raid, the next villain, the next target to protect. Then a signal cut through the night. A wave of coordinated movement. Class 1A. Deku. Uraraka shouted, rushing forward. "Stop. We don't want to hurt you." Midoriya. Bakugo barked, fists crackling, glaring at him. "What the hell are you doing, wearing that suit?" The rest of Class 1A spread out, their suits reinforced or laced with vibranium, thanks in part to Izuku's gifts. Hatsume's new arc reactors hummed across the field, powering long-range weapons, enhanced flight modules, and kinetic buffers. Iida and Ojiro had steel and vibranium suits, their strikes capable of long-range attacks that could counter Sentinel's movement. Momo stood behind them, guilt etched across her face. She had supplied the vibranium that allowed Izuku to continue this crusade for so long. "If only I hadn't, maybe this wouldn't have gotten so out of control." The battle. Izuku moved first, a blur of cyan light and nanite armor. Blackwhip lashed out, snapping around the legs of Iida, blocking projectiles from Kaminari and Jiro. Float kept him above the field, Fa Jin and Gearshift giving him bursts of acceleration to stay ahead of attacks. One by one, Class 1A's weapons and gadgets struck him. Arc reactors flared, vibranium blades clanged against armor, long-range strikes grazed him, and yet Sentinel kept moving, pulling them away from buildings, civilians, and each other with calculated precision. Hatsume's gadgets came online, delivering micro-shock pulses and tethered grapples to restrain him, but he adapted instantly. He was not fighting to hurt them. He was moving to protect them. Mirko intervenes. For a brief moment, it seemed he might escape, slipping past the edges of the battle, leaving the streets behind. And then, impact. A boot slammed into his chest, launching him onto the rubble. Cyan sparks flared as armor plates skidded against concrete. Mirko stood above him, furious, tears streaked across her face. "But, Izuku, you're going to die doing this. You're going to die in that stupid costume. And I know there is nothing I can say to stop you from doing it. But I never in a million years imagined that I'd fall in love with someone who was broken all around, and seeing himself break down further. I don't want that for you. You have to understand. If you keep going like this, someone is going to kill you." Her voice cracked, and for the first time in months, Izuku felt the wall around his heart falter. The cyan light of his suit dimmed. Black whip lowered. Float powered down. Gearshift and FA Jin energy dissipated into the night. He stared at her, exhausted beyond measure. He had been fighting for months, believing that carrying the weight alone was the only way. But here, standing before him, were people who had never stopped believing he could be more than a lone sentinel. Breaking the cycle, slowly, he deactivated his nanite armor fully, spikes folding back, light fading. The hum of vibranium tech stopped. He breathed, trembling, finally allowing himself to feel. Class 1A approached cautiously, some wary, some hopeful. Bakugo's glare softened just slightly, Uraraka's eyes glimmered with tears, and Momo's guilt seemed to release just a little with every step closer they took. I can't keep doing this alone, Izuku admitted, voice hoarse. If I don't let people lift me up the way I lift others, this will just turn into an endless cycle. Mirko's hand found his again, squeezing gently. Then let us, she whispered. Let us be your strength for once. You don't have to bear it all. The streets were quiet except for the hum of recovery drones and Hatsume's arc reactors powering down. The team moved to guide him back to UA, careful, protective. Sentinel had stopped being a lone hunter. And as he walked with them, shoulder to shoulder, Izuku Midoriya, no longer just Deku, no longer just Sentinel, let himself finally feel that he could rely on others. The world burned in chaos. Screens across Japan flickered with images of destruction, collapsing buildings, burning streets, and terrified civilians running for their lives. The Paranormal Liberation Front had launched coordinated attacks on multiple cities at once. Hero ranks were stretched thin, and even the most seasoned pros were struggling to keep up. Izuku Midoriya, no, Sentinel, stood atop a shattered rooftop in Musudafu, his cyan-tinged armor deactivated to a nanite wristband. The city spread beneath him like a war zone, smoke curling into the dark sky. He had fought wars before, seen what could happen when he hesitated, but this was different. Every life, every civilian, depended on precise timing and brutal efficiency. And he couldn't rely on anyone else. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. You don't have to do this alone. The voice came from behind, firm and unwavering. Mirko, Rumi Usajiyama, stood with her usual fire, crimson eyes locked on him. Her ears twitched, every muscle poised to spring into action. We're coming with you, whether you like it or not. You're not dying out here while I'm standing around. Izuku's fists clenched. He wanted to argue, to push her away, to shoulder this burden alone, but he knew better. He had seen what a single man, no matter how powerful, could do, and how easily it could spiral into failure. All right, he said finally, voice low. But don't get in the way. Her grin didn't falter. Try me. Preparation. At UA, the rest of Class 1A and the pro heroes were preparing for war. Momo Yaoyorozu worked tirelessly, sweat glistening on her forehead as she carefully assembled vibranium armor and arc reactor-powered gadgets. She had only entrusted these enhancements to the most reliable heroes. She knew the danger if the wrong hands got hold of them. Sentinel will need every edge, Momo muttered to herself, adjusting the plating of a new suit. Hatsume hovered nearby, eyes glittering as she fine-tuned the 8 AI cores, the mechs now upgraded with vibranium to support him in combat. Across the lab, Class 1A tested their hybrid suits. Ida's armor was reinforced with steel and vibranium, optimized for long-range strikes and rapid acceleration. Ojiro's tail now incorporated vibranium plates for maximum impact. Hatsume's gadgets hummed with arc reactor energy, providing extra strength, defense, and mobility. All of them carried a piece of Izuku's legacy in their gear. They had his guidance, his foresight, and the technology he had gifted them. And yet, for all the preparation, the weight of the coming battle pressed on them like a storm cloud. Sentinel's choice. Izuku stood alone for a moment, scanning the horizon. Helicopters moved over the city, lights piercing the smoke. Civilians screamed below, but he didn't flinch. He had already calculated their safest paths, where the villains were concentrated, and which threats required his immediate attention. He refused to stay at HQ. Sitting behind a desk, coordinating from safety, he couldn't. The front was moving too fast. If he stayed, thousands would die. He had to intercept all for one in Shigaraki directly, even if it meant placing himself on the front lines. "You're not doing this alone," Mirko said again, stepping beside him. Her presence grounded him, a tether to the world he was fighting to protect. He looked at her, at the students who had trained under him, at the mechs and armor Momo had spent weeks perfecting. A small flicker of hope stirred inside him. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry the weight entirely by himself. Gathering forces, the heroes moved out. Mirko led the charge alongside Sentinel, leaping into action with raw power and unyielding determination. Class 1A spread through the city in coordinated strikes, gadgets humming, arc reactors glowing as they prepared to support Sentinel in the chaos. The first explosions tore through the streets, smoke and fire blending into the night sky. Nomu surged from hiding, villains rallied, and the war began in earnest. But amidst the chaos, a small truth glimmered: Sentinel was not alone. And that, perhaps, was the first advantage the front hadn't anticipated. Sirens wailed as buildings crumbled, smoke painting the horizon black. The Paranormal Liberation Front's coordinated strike turned the city into a battlefield in seconds. Civilians trapped, Nomu prowling the streets, and villains flooding in from every direction. Sentinel moved first. Cyan light streaked across the skyline as Izuku launched himself forward, gearshift snapping reality into bursts of speed. Blackwhip lashed out, yanking civilians from falling rubble and pulling villains into the path of his fists. Fa Jin surged in his legs, propelling him into Nomu that stood 3 stories tall. His armor's plating shimmered with vibranium reinforcement, shrugging off claws that would have torn steel apart. He dismantled threats with brutal efficiency. A Nomu lunged. He caught its throat, slammed it into the ground, then blasted its core with a pulse of arc reactor energy. Another screeched from above, wings unfurling. Izuku ripped it down with Blackwhip and shattered its skull with a single vibranium-clad punch. But for every enemy he crushed, more emerged. And Izuku felt it, the creeping weight of not being fast enough, not saving enough. The arrival of allies. A metallic roar split the chaos. 8 colossal silhouettes descended into the city, their frames gleaming with vibranium. They landed in synchronized formation, ground quaking beneath their impact. The mechs opened their visors, glowing cyan optics scanning the battlefield. "Sentinel," one said, voice carrying warmth beneath the metal. "Long time no see." Izuku's breath caught. The AIs. His AIs. The ones he had created and lived with during his years away. His companions when he was alone, his students, his partners. Now, rebuilt with Momo and Hatsume's help, they stood tall in vibranium bodies. Each mech fought like a hero in its own right. One projected energy shields, protecting civilians as rubble crashed down. Another deployed drone swarms, cutting through Nomu wings. 2 worked in tandem, unleashing controlled blasts that leveled villain squads without harming innocents. For the first time since the war began, Izuku felt the battlefield shift in their favor. Mirko and Class 1A. Mirko's battle cry cut through the air as she drove her heel into an elite Nomu, shattering its jaw. Blood streaked down her arm, but she didn't care. She grinned savagely and launched again, her movements a blur of muscle and instinct. "Keep up, Zuku," she shouted. Izuku almost cracked a smile beneath his helmet. Almost. Class 1A joined the fray, each wielding gear designed with Izuku's foresight. Ida's vibranium and steel armor amplified his recipro burst, his kicks launching shockwaves that cleared streets. Ojiro's tail gleamed with vibranium reinforcement, slamming Nomu into concrete with earth-shattering force. Momo's creations and Hatsume's gadgets armed their classmates with arc reactor-powered weapons, bright bursts of light carving paths through villain ranks. Everywhere Sentinel looked, his allies fought with precision, courage, and trust in the tech he had left them. Izuku's struggle. Yet even as victory seemed possible, Izuku's chest tightened. His HUD tracked casualty numbers climbing in real time. Civilians crushed before Blackwhip could reach them. Heroes torn down before he could intervene. Every scream cut into him. Every life lost was another he had failed to save. Mirko noticed. She slammed a Nomu into the pavement, ears twitching as she caught the way Izuku froze mid-motion. She bounded to his side, sweat and blood streaking her face. "Don't you dare spiral on me now," she growled, shoving him lightly with her elbow. "You're saving more people than anyone out here. Don't throw that away because you can't save everyone." Her words anchored him. His breathing steadied, his fists tightened. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. Escalation. The ground trembled. From the heart of the city, a surge of malevolent energy spread outward, cracking asphalt and shattering glass. Civilians screamed as they were yanked into portals. Shadows stretched across the battlefield. All for One's voice rolled over the chaos, dark and commanding. You think you can hold back the tide, boy? You've only delayed the inevitable. And beside him, Shigaraki stepped forward, decay crawling over the ground, controlled and precise. The war had only just begun. The sky split open. Waves of raw malice rippled through the battlefield as All for One and Shigaraki advanced. Buildings withered into dust where Shigaraki's decay touched, whole blocks collapsing in seconds. Civilians screamed, scattering, only to be pulled away at the last moment by Blackwhip tendrils or dragged into cover by the mechs. And at the center of it all, Sentinel Izuku launched forward, armor glowing cyan as gearshift bent the rhythm of reality itself. His fists cracked against All for One's armored mask with enough force to rattle the skyline. Shigaraki countered, claws gleaming, decay crawling up Izuku's gauntlet before he ripped away and used float to dart out of range. Every second was survival. Every strike carried the weight of millions. The villains unleashed. All for One raised a hand, quirks layering in a single motion. A storm of fire, ice, and compressed air roared outward, a tidal wave of destruction. Izuku braced, only for 3 mechs to intercept, their shields flaring as they absorbed the impact. Focus, Sentinel. One AI's voice boomed through comms. We'll hold the walls, you go for the head. Shigaraki lunged at that moment, decay surging through the ground like a plague. Blackwhip snapped in all directions, yanking nearby heroes and civilians into the sky before the street melted away beneath them. Izuku dropped back down in an instant, Fa Jin coiled in his legs. He slammed Shigaraki through a crumbling building, only for decay to eat through the walls around them. Every hit left his muscles burning, but he refused to stop. The heroes rally. Class 1A moved like a well-oiled machine, their upgraded suits blazing with vibranium and arc reactor energy. Ida's Recipro Turbo scattered villains, his reinforced kicks detonating shockwaves. Momo's creations flowed seamlessly into the battlefield, anti-decay coatings, energy weapons, and mobile barricades. Ojiro's tail cut down Nomu faster than most pro heroes could react. Mirko tore through the front lines, her kicks detonating Nomu like bombs. She didn't wait for orders, she didn't need to. She just kept the monsters off Izuku long enough for him to stay locked on his targets. For once, Izuku wasn't alone in the storm. He was the spearhead, but behind him was an army. Cracks in the foundation. But even with everything, Izuku's power, the AI's precision, Mirko's ferocity, Class 1A's ingenuity, the villains weren't slowing. Shigaraki's decay wasn't wild anymore. It was strategic. He carved escape routes, forced heroes into choke points, and weaponized the battlefield itself. Every time Izuku thought he had him cornered, the ground itself disintegrated, forcing him to pull back or risk losing allies in the collapse. And All for One, he wasn't even fighting seriously. Every move was measured, every counter effortless. When Izuku's fist cracked against his mask, the villain barely shifted. You've grown stronger, All for One's voice slithered through the battlefield. But strength means nothing when you've tied yourself down with others. Izuku's teeth grit, his armor flickered as his reactors strained under the pressure of constant combat. Blackwhip lashed out, dragging 3 civilians clear of falling rubble. At the same time, Fa Jin charged in his legs, readying another strike on Shigaraki. He couldn't stop moving, couldn't stop choosing between saving lives and fighting monsters. Breaking point. The clash became a blur. Izuku slammed into Shigaraki with gearshift-enhanced blows, the villain's body cratering into the street, only for All for One to strike from behind, a dozen quirks ripping into Sentinel's armor at once. Plates shattered, alarms screamed in his HUD, and Izuku crashed into the pavement. He staggered back to his feet, chest heaving. He had fought armies. He had faced gods. But this was different. Even with everything he had, it wasn't enough. Not alone. And for the first time, as Mirko launched back into the fight, as Class 1A surged at his side, as his AI family held the line against impossible odds, Izuku realized he wasn't carrying the war anymore. They all were. Great. I'll flow directly into Chapter 4. emotional anchors and make it the natural continuation of where we left off. Izuku reeling, realizing he can't do this alone, but instead of lectures, his allies show him through action that they've got his back. Chapter 4. Emotional Anchors. The air reeked of ash and ozone. Izuku braced himself against the cracked asphalt, breath ragged as sparks flickered across his armor. He raised his eyes. Shigaraki stood amidst the ruin, decay creeping like veins across the ground. All for One loomed behind him, a silhouette of inevitability. For a heartbeat, the battlefield seemed lost. And then the reinforcements surged. Class 1A's stand. Ida's Recipro burst blazed as he intercepted a wave of Nomu, armored kicks shattering their formation. Ojiro spun through the wreckage, his tail shearing into mutated flesh with surgical precision. From above, Yaoyorozu launched newly crafted energy turrets, vibranium-lined, peppering the villains with coordinated fire. The mechs, the Izuku had built, marched in formation, cyan shields glowing as they formed a defensive line. "Hold steady," one AI commanded, its voice resolute. Sentinel must remain focused on the primary threat. Izuku's throat tightened. They weren't fighting for him. They were fighting with him. Mirko's defiance. A Nomu lunged, claws aimed for Izuku's exposed flank, but Mirko slammed into it midair, her heel exploding through its skull. Blood spattered across her cheek, but she didn't falter. "You keep your eyes forward, Sentinel," she barked, grinning through the chaos. "We'll clear the trash." Another Nomu rose, and another kick sent it cratering into rubble. Her strikes weren't just powerful, they were promises. She was anchoring him, refusing to let him fall. Sentinels shift. Izuku clenched his fists, gearshift thrumming in his veins. For years he'd carried the weight of every life lost, every battle survived. But now, in this burning city, he finally understood, strength wasn't about carrying it alone. "Yaoyorozu, lock down escape routes," he shouted, voice sharp with command. "Hatsume, keep the mechs covering civilians. Iida, Ojiro, on Shigaraki's flanks. Don't let him spread decay unchecked." Orders snapped out as naturally as his punches. Black Whip lashed, dragging allies clear of collapsing towers. Float lifted heroes over waves of decay. Fa Jin coiled into his strikes, hammering all for one with blows heavy enough to shake windows. And everywhere he faltered, someone was there. A mech shield rose. A classmate struck from the side. Mirko's laughter rang as she tore into another elite Nomu. The tide turns. All for One tilted his head, watching as Izuku's allies moved in perfect concert. "Interesting," he murmured. "The boy has stopped fighting like a lone soldier, and begun fighting like a leader." Shigaraki sneered, lunging forward, but Izuku met him head-on, Fa Jin exploding through his fist as gearshift accelerated the blow beyond sight. Shigaraki skidded back, coughing blood, his decay barely contained. Izuku stood tall, armor scorched, eyes blazing. "I'm not alone anymore." The battlefield answered with thunder. Heroes, students, mechs, and Mirko, all pressing forward together. The air reeked of ash and ozone. Izuku braced himself against the cracked asphalt, breath ragged as sparks flickered across his armor. He raised his eyes. Shigaraki stood amidst the ruin, decay creeping like veins across the ground. All for One loomed behind him, a silhouette of inevitability. For a heartbeat, the battlefield seemed lost. And then the reinforcements surged. Class 1A's stand. Ida's Recipro burst blazed as he intercepted a wave of Nomu, armored kicks shattering their formation. Ojiro spun through the wreckage, his tail shearing into mutated flesh with surgical precision. From above, Yaoyorozu launched newly crafted energy turrets, vibranium-lined, peppering the villains with coordinated fire. The mechs, the Izuku had built, marched in formation, cyan shields glowing as they formed a defensive line. "Hold steady," one AI commanded, its voice resolute. Sentinel must remain focused on the primary threat. Izuku's throat tightened. They weren't fighting for him. They were fighting with him. Mirko's defiance. A Nomu lunged, claws aimed for Izuku's exposed flank, but Mirko slammed into it midair, her heel exploding through its skull. Blood spattered across her cheek, but she didn't falter. "You keep your eyes forward, Sentinel," she barked, grinning through the chaos. "We'll clear the trash." Another Nomu rose, and another kick sent it cratering into rubble. Her strikes weren't just powerful, they were promises. She was anchoring him, refusing to let him fall. Sentinels shift. Izuku clenched his fists, gearshift thrumming in his veins. For years he'd carried the weight of every life lost, every battle survived. But now, in this burning city, he finally understood, strength wasn't about carrying it alone. Yaoyorozu, lock down escape routes, he shouted, voice sharp with command. Hatsume, keep the mechs covering civilians. Iida, Ojiro, on Shigaraki's flanks. Don't let him spread decay unchecked. Orders snapped out as naturally as his punches. Black Whip lashed, dragging allies clear of collapsing towers. Float lifted heroes over waves of decay. Fa Jin coiled into his strikes, hammering all for one with blows heavy enough to shake windows. And everywhere he faltered, someone was there. A mech shield rose. A classmate struck from the side. Mirko's laughter rang as she tore into another elite Nomu. The tide turns. All for one tilted his head, watching as Izuku's allies moved in perfect concert. Interesting, he murmured. The boy has stopped fighting like a lone soldier, and begun fighting like a leader. Shigaraki sneered, lunging forward, but Izuku met him head-on, Fa Jin exploding through his fist as gearshift accelerated the blow beyond sight. Shigaraki skidded back, coughing blood, his decay barely contained. Izuku stood tall, armor scorched, eyes blazing. I'm not alone anymore. The battlefield answered with thunder. Heroes, students, mechs, and Mirko, all pressing forward together. For the first time since the war began, the tide began to shift. The city burned in silence for half a second. Then all for one moved. His body split into writhing shadows, dozens of stolen quirks forming at once. Tendrils like spears, jets of flame, compressed air cannons, kinetic blasts. They hammered toward Izuku with unrelenting precision. Izuku countered with pure instinct. Gearshift slowed time around his mind. Black Whip lashed outward, redirecting incoming strikes while Float carried him above the worst of the blasts. Fa Jin charged into his legs, propelling him forward faster than the next wave could land. His fist met all for one's chest, shockwaves rippling outward. But Shigaraki was already there. Decay spread from his hand like a living disease. Izuku twisted, vibranium plating sloughing off as it rotted away in seconds. His gauntlet melted, exposing his arm beneath. Only a split-second release of Float and a Black Whip tether saved him from being swallowed whole. You can't win, Shigaraki rasped, his grin cracked and bloody. You're one man, carrying a dying world. Izuku spat blood and pressed forward anyway. The counterattack. Shigaraki lunged with decay pulsing in waves, aiming for the trapped heroes below. All for one followed, tendrils spearing into the wreckage to drag survivors closer. Their coordination was perfect. Shigaraki to erase, all for one to harvest. But Class 1A broke their rhythm. Yaoyorozu's turrets cut through tendrils with vibranium-lined precision. Kaminari overloaded his reactor, blasting arcs of lightning that fried the creeping decay midair. Iida, his armor cracked and dented, dashed across falling debris to kick civilians into safety nets Zero flung between buildings. They didn't stop Shigaraki and all for one outright. But they kept them off balance, kept them from striking freely. And that gave Izuku the openings he needed. The decisive blow. All for one unleashed his full arsenal. Shockwaves flattening blocks, firestorms rising, gravity wells collapsing structures inward. Shigaraki added chaos, his decay spreading in jagged tendrils across anything that moved. Together, they were unstoppable. Until Izuku stopped holding back. Gearshift screamed in his blood. Fa Jin coiled tighter than ever before. Every muscle, every cell in his body aligned with One for All's limitless torrent. Cyan light exploded from his armor as it fused with the power coursing through him. Black Whip bound All for One and Shigaraki together, chains glowing, wrapping tighter the more they resisted. Izuku's voice shook the battlefield. This isn't just my fight. It's theirs, the ones who believed in me, the ones who fought beside me, the ones I couldn't save. And I won't let you take another. He rocketed forward, his punch landed, an eruption of light and thunder so loud it cracked the heavens. The explosion swallowed both villains, tearing through every defense, every stolen quirk, every fragment of their will. When the light cleared, All for One and Shigaraki were broken on the ground. Their tyranny ended, but Izuku's right arm was mangled beyond recognition, the cost of channeling so much power through one strike. He staggered, knees buckling. The fight was won, but his body could take no more. Chapter 6. Resolution. The battlefield was silent. Nomu fled or collapsed, their masters will shattered. Villains surrendered in droves as heroes pressed forward. The mechs formed a final shield line, protecting the last civilians as emergency crews swarmed in. And in the center, Sentinel fell. Mirko was there before anyone else. She caught him as he collapsed, his broken arm hanging useless at his side, blood dripping into her chestplate. Her face, streaked with dirt and tears, hardened. "You stubborn idiot," she whispered, clutching him tightly. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Aftermath. Hours later, the war zone smoldered under dawn's light. The death toll was heavy, but without Sentinel, it would have been extinction. Reporters whispered his name, Sentinel, with reverence. Survivors wept when they saw him carried on a stretcher, still breathing. Class 1A regrouped, battered but alive. Momo stared at her reactor cores, trembling with relief that they had worked. Iida bowed his head in silent gratitude. Even Bakugo, bruised and bloody, muttered, "Dumbass. You actually did it." Reconciliation. Back at UA's temporary base, Izuku lay in recovery, his right arm bandaged and strapped. His eyes flickered open to see Class 1A gathered around him, their faces tired but hopeful. "You're still Deku to us," Uraraka said softly, holding back tears. Bakugo's voice was rougher. "No, you're Izuku. Don't forget that." And for the first time in years, Izuku didn't flinch at the name. Mirko and Izuku. Later, when the room had cleared, Mirko sat beside him. She looked at him. Not the armor, not the soldier, but the man broken beneath. "I thought I lost you out there," she admitted, voice raw. "And I realized something. I don't care if you're Sentinel, or Deku, or anything else. You're Izuku, and I'm not letting you carry this weight alone anymore." His throat tightened, but no words came. Only his hand reaching out, trembling, finding hers. For the first time, he let someone hold him without resistance. The war was over. The villains were defeated, but the world was scarred, broken, fragile. And Izuku, finally, wasn't standing alone. The city skyline glittered beneath the morning sun, rebuilt from the ashes of war. New towers stretched toward the heavens, monuments of resilience. And at the heart of the Hero Public Safety Commission's headquarters stood a statue of Sentinel, helmet under one arm, his hand reaching out toward the people. But Sentinel wasn't there anymore. A family reborn. Izuku Midoriya, older now, with streaks of silver in his dark green hair, sat at a kitchen table scattered with school projects and crayon drawings. His children laughed nearby. Tony Midoriya, sharp-eyed and mischievous, tinkered with a small arc reactor toy that hummed faintly. His twin sister, Natasha Midoriya, bold and fearless, was already pulling on mock hero gloves, challenging her brother to a sparring match in the living room. Mirko, Rumi, leaned against the counter, arms crossed but smiling, her ears twitching as she called out. "Don't break the furniture, brats. Your old man can't keep fixing everything you destroy." Izuku chuckled, soft lines at the corners of his eyes showing the years of struggle and healing. "They'll outgrow it," he said, though his tone carried a warmth that betrayed his pride. For him, this was everything he had once thought impossible. The chairman of change. As chairman of the HPSC, Izuku had rewritten the very foundation of hero society. Gone was the era of unchecked corruption and blind pursuit of glory. Candidates who sought fame without heart were confronted with the truth. Heroism was sacrifice, responsibility, and empathy. Those who failed to learn that lesson were expelled, given one chance to reflect. Fail again, and they were blacklisted, barred from hero academies forever. It was harsh, but necessary. And under Izuku's guidance, the new generation of heroes rose, not as celebrities but as protectors. Honoring the fallen. Across Japan, statues stood where battles had once raged. Names etched in stone honored the heroes who had given everything, from the first symbol of peace, All Might, to those who had fallen in the final war. But in one secluded hall, hidden from the public, stood monuments different from the rest. Stark, Romanoff, Rogers, Maximoff, Barton and T'Challa. The heroes of another world. Few knew the truth. Only Izuku, his closest allies, and the friends who had carried that secret through the years. To the public, they were legends without faces. To Izuku, they were mentors, inspirations, and family. A doorway to the future. 10 years had passed since the war. Melissa Shield and Mei Hatsume, now seasoned inventors at 27, stood in a gleaming laboratory beneath UA. The room buzzed with restrained excitement. A massive device sat in the center, cloaked under a tarp. Wires hummed. Arc reactors pulsed like a heartbeat. The doors opened with a hiss. Izuku stepped in, his suit no longer heavy armor but a refined coat threaded with vibranium trim, a man both hero and leader. Melissa and Mei looked up, both grinning despite exhaustion. "You're just in time," Melissa said. "We finished it," Mei added, patting the tarp. "Want us to power it up?" Izuku walked forward. With a nod, they pulled the cover free. Beneath it stood a portal frame, sleek and polished, arcs of energy dancing along its rim. The machinery whined as it powered on, colors swirling until a rainbow-hued vortex shimmered into being. For a moment, Izuku stared into it, the reflection of endless possibilities gleaming in his eyes. He turned to them with a small, knowing smile. "I'll see you in an hour. Just have to meet up with some old friends of mine." Without hesitation, Izuku Midoriya, Sentinel, Chairman, husband, father, stepped into the light. The portal flared, and then he was gone. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and now we will see you in the next video.